a little bit of ALEC and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And those organizations that have done that have actually created a bigger fiduciary responsibility. So companies like Empower, just one, have that one, and we shop it on a regular basis. So go ahead. Again, just some slides that I usually go through on the 401k side, but effective plan design is key. If there's something that you're trying to accomplish by offering a plan, I need to know that, because it might be able to be something that we can do, get creative with, and be able to provide. But we need to know those and what we want to do, and we can have that inside of the plan. Retirement rate, gotta help people. They look to their employer to help them retire. And unfortunately, sometimes, and I'm not saying this is the group, but we don't take that into consideration of selecting plans or how often we communicate and put that in front of the employees. Because many times what they have through the employer, that's going to be their largest retirement plan asset the rest of their life. And that's even if they leave the town. And so we want to make that very impactful from that. Again, be repetitive on the administration report, go ahead. On the administration report, support and fiduciary responsibility is going to be key. With Empower, with our team, whether it's Scott or Brent, at the end of the day, Corinne and Cindy know that they reach out to me, and I am pretty responsive. That's going to be their call, not mine, as far as if that's a fact or not. But my relationship with the employee is key. And so when we go through the full service, we want to make sure that you're going to have a dedicated person. And I'm going to talk about this in differences here in a minute. Let's get my recommendation out on the table. I like Empower. And you're going to see why from this point forward over the T. Rowe Price, the Nationwides, the Vanguards, a lot of different plans that I took a look at. I like Empower. Here's one key. They have a dedicated governmental plan division that no other has. So what that means is right now, when an employee calls into Mutual of Omaha, they get a Mutual of Omaha rep. They sometimes don't see or know, is that a governmental plan? Is that a 401k plan? And there are differences. They, at Empower, have that own division. So when your employees call, we don't need to worry about, are they getting 401k rule or law, or are they getting the governmental rule or law? And in my opinion, that was pretty key when starting to vet through a lot of this. Through the transition, you'll see the dedicated services from a standpoint of helping these ladies with the transition. I know that was a big question from last time this discussion came up. But how do we minimize the transition impact on you? And I'll address that in a minute. But go ahead. Fiduciary oversight. I think I beat this up a little bit, but I had structured this plan, and we'll let Dave lecture you guys here in a minute on what I told him already, but give you a hard time. But when we take a look at fiduciary responsibility, he was asking me about investments. We want, with this type of population, we want to minimize risk to the town, to the board, to the committee, whoever selects investments. The way I put it is a 338 protection. Now, that's a number that really probably nobody cares to remember, but 338 is we use investment that takes 100% fiduciary responsibilities for the investments inside the program. So you don't have that liability of should we put this investment or that investment inside. We don't have to have the investment committee meetings to that extent inside of a program like this. So that's very key from a liability standpoint. Right now we're at a 321 fiduciary responsibility where there would be some additional needs. Most of the time I'm able to take care of that advisement on, hey, they just XYZ manager, we don't like them anymore, we're going to replace them. Should we do it? You guys would have to have a vote on that, which then does what? Creates more liability, which we're trying to avoid. So, again, I spent a lot on fiduciary inside more 401k plans. Repeatable process. Everything that I do, looking at the plan, we have not reviewed this plan since I think that process started in late 2013. I came involved in 2014. Most of the time, we advise that we are going to have a process that monitors not only the plan, but also the employee's progress as we go through it. Are we going to have a compliance review? Are we going to do some of these things? Both of the Empower and T. Will Price, when I was talking to them about the plan, and going through certifications of fiduciary responsibility, we need to be more diligent about having some of these type of meetings. I'm sorry, but that's going to be more on these guys' plate, but it doesn't need to be in this format. But I have that repeatable process, just like, 3 bullets down, the investment lineup. That's going to be a lot of what I have going through, vetting the performance, vetting the investments that are offered inside of that. Go ahead. Like I said, it is very important to me to have our employees ready for retirement. I think all around, I've always offered meetings. I have a lot of meetings over the phone with new employees, what concerns them, how can we get them to saving more money. And really, it's getting them in that place of education. Do they understand what a mutual fund is? Do they understand what an index fund is? How that impacts their retirement over the long run? How do we give them peace of mind? I advise whether it's how do I help them free up some cash flow? How do I help them get out of debt? Now, as a CFP, I take on that fiduciary responsibility to be able to advise down that path. Investment diversification, as we know, we don't want to just have everything in growth stocks and then craziness in the world happens and we all start wearing masks and the market drops 34% and what happens? Employees get out at the wrong time. Why? Well, education is the big reason. One thing that Empower does better than really anybody I've ever come across is the website is completely different and it's all geared to the education. If we look at the last 20 years, had you missed 10 of the best days in the market, that equates to about a 2.5% reduction in return each and every year. Why is that? Well, those best days usually follow what? The minus 34% return. They got they got scared out of the market, and then they missed that next best day, which usually follows within 2 weeks. It's all around education. The outcome of the employees comes around there. All distributions, most distributions, loans, etc., come across my desk. I don't try to talk them out of it, but I give them the pros and cons of doing that and seeing that there's alternatives. Go ahead. You saw this in a very simple format. Again, to spare you the spreadsheets and things like that. I'm not much of a spreadsheet type of guy. Our current costs with Mutual Omaha are up there. We can save money by going to Empower, not only on the towns, from the 1,700 to the 1,200, but it saves in fees from the impact of the employees. I can't beat a low-cost T. Rowe Price, but when we look at going to a T. Rowe Price, we have to hire an outside TPA versus when I say a bundled solution, everything is in-house with Empower. One group of people to deal with, one group of this transition, and it's all handled in there. Right now, we are at about 350, and I corrected it because I saw it in the report. We're about $350,000 in assets inside of the plan. I will go to the plan record keeper, the Empowers of the world, and look at repricing at $500,000, $1 million, and we look at it. They look at what are the average participants and what are their account balances. They also look at total assets. So we look at a lot of those. Price matters. We could go direct to T-low price, but after the questions of the town council here, the responses, the readiness, and the desire for Empower to get your case has tipped the scales. It's more than just the cost. It's what are we going to get from an organization that wants to give the most to the governmental plans. Go ahead. I stole this from them, really, because there was some implementation. Your staff and these young ladies next to me, my job is to make their life as easy as possible. We already have the current plan document. That plan document, we will map that inside of Empower. We'll have a welcoming call, then we'll have going through the plan provisions and getting the termination letter. Cindy is very familiar with this because she did it with me several years ago when we went through this. When we have phone calls, it's to go through the details and see if we missed anything. It's not to have them making a ton of decisions. It's not taking a lot of time off of their, out of their normal activities of what they need to do. Then we will produce the transition notices, the proper legal action and switching the plan. It gets set up. The hardest part is when we start transitioning payroll. Empower is premier with everybody. Do you use an outside payroll service? Or is it all you do it? So it works with you. Okay. But all the big payroll companies, they have what's called 360. So if a change is made on Empower, it goes into the payroll system. If you make a change, it goes into Empower. And so they're much easier to do business with. The blackout is the hardest part. A blackout can usually as little as 2 weeks, as much as, we're going to be as much as 40 days. And that's where the participants can't make changes. Their money is invested. We're not going to be out of the market. But they just can't make changes and really gain the visibility that they do because the money is transferring from one organization to the next. And so they limit it, and that's what's called a blackout period. Go ahead to the next one. Getting ahead of a couple of questions here that I know we had. I'm not going to call them out, but who in the room did not know who Empower is? Oh, geez, this is so disappointing to me. The greatest football team in the world, their stadium is named after this football team. They did get naming rights last year to the Denver Broncos Stadium. Who here knows of Great West? Or, as you start to get it, Empower spun off several years ago and called themselves Empower. I want to say that was maybe 13, 14, 15, somewhere around in there. This is a Denver-based company. I drive by their building when I go to my Denver office both ways. They're in the Denver Tech Center, the ones that look like half-moon shaped right down there. You will have a relationship manager that is here in Colorado. All their call centers, except for one, is here in Colorado. I think that's important, and the only time they have outside is because blizzards happen and if they need staff to do that, that's why they have a few outside. In the governmental plan space, chair number one, I can go after each one of those options up there. If we can get a cheaper plan and we can get the number one competitor in there, I thought that was a pretty good win. They are the top. Okay? Their technology is outstanding. Their really desire to improve. And Corey, she's our account rep for this division. They're extremely passionate about one thing, and that's increasing assets and employee output. That's what we're doing. As this plan grows, costs will go nothing but down. And we'll address that here in a minute. You can go to the next thing here. Here's some questions that Corinne sent me. I'll address these quickly. City of Lakewood, Empower. Greenwood Village, Empower. Austin, Texas, Empower. Now, I got an email to Empower Friday with these questions. And their eagerness. This is the number one competitor, by the way, or the number one horse in this space. And they want your plan. They like to defend the home court if you want. By Monday afternoon, I think 2 or 3 o'clock, I've got a 3-page email that I have supplied the ladies here of their responses. T. Rowe Price, I had to beg. References, they're glad to give references. The challenge is they wanted to have a reference that was meaningful to you, and from Friday to Monday that was a little challenging. So I had to they gave me some general ones that they have. I have some letters in a file here. But I am not concerned from that standpoint. They work with some of the top governmental plans, not only in our state. They have a huge history, and they put some studies of some Texas communities, and specifically Austin, which I do have record of here if we need. There was a question of reviewing the plan. We haven't physically dove into this plan since 2014. It's time. I think there's better technology available. I think we're shaving a little bit on some costs. But the fiduciary protections in the reporting that Empower does is impeccable. And again, there's some samples in there that I've given. If you give me another 45 minutes, we'll go through that. But they do their job. When should we do it? Annually. But they have the report produced on a quarterly basis that if you give me a little bit of heads up, at the end of the quarter, if the group wants to take a look at that, we can always do that. Upfront cost, $0. Empower, $250 on the T. Rowe Price side. So if we need to discuss $0, we can vote on that. Commitment on the staff side. I addressed this earlier. We want to review. Most of the phone calls last between 5 and 15 minutes when we do a weekly review for roughly 8 to 10 week basis. And the reason why, it's just, hey, this is what we've done. This is where we're at. Corinne or Cindy, do you have questions? No, we're moving on. Okay. The heavy lifting is on the record keeper side and the TPA side, and it's not on your staff side. Rate history, stability. Most people didn't know this. I didn't know this. Most plans in the governmental space have embedded in their program a 5-year embedded guarantee. Empowers, it's embedded in there. They haven't had a rate increase. If we do anything, we go down. Why? Because your assets go up, which gives us a better pricing structure. Let's go through an example, because it's the example that I asked Empower the other day. Let's go the other way. We lose some employees, they roll their money out, go from $350 to $150. Do you raise the rate? No. It's already built in. So we don't have to worry about that. Okay? So default grant is the 5-year, but again, I've got the documentation on that side. Last piece, and then I'll be quiet and answer questions. Mutual Omaha charges you to get out of the plan. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing it's going to be about $1,000. Good thing is, Empower's going to pay whatever that is up to the $1,500. I got it in email. That is taken care of. Corey said she has never seen anything over $1,500, so I'm pretty comfortable that we will be in that wheelhouse. You pay the bill, they send the invoice that the bill was paid to Empower. Power sends the town a check for whatever that is. 0, 0, 0. Last one, again, we're not going to go through this today. You guys will get tired of my voice. If anybody wants to log in and look at the technology, I'm welcome to do it. I put it in the documents to everybody as well. But you're more than welcome to log in and look at the technology the employees would see. Compared to Mutual's current plan, it's really second to none. Empower built their system. We don't know this, but Mutual of Omaha, you don't have Mutual of Omaha. You have a census. They have hired a separate company to do all their technology, to do their record keeping, and they took a stamp and put their logo on it. Empower owns their everything you see. So, questions? I'm done. Was that asking? Probably.
All right, questions?
Just a question for Mr. King. You reviewed all this, you're happy with it?
I reviewed it. I am not familiar with Empower. This is the first, well, it's first introduced, the first time I've heard. I have no opinion. I think this is a decision of the board and input from the employees.
Well, I was one that did not know Empower. You said you were spun off, or what company were you spun off?
Well, you got Great West, which is the more known parent company, is what they started out with. And then when I say spun off, they just renamed the retirement plan division as Empower. Okay. Another great thing to come, they just purchased a company called Personal Capital, which is bringing. We're hearing a lot of robo-advisors and things like that. They just purchased a company called Personal Capital this summer, which is bringing more services to participants in another format. Not everybody wants to see a guy in a suit, and so it gives it more from that standpoint. Has anybody heard of Mass Mutual? They just purchased Mass Mutual and their entire retirement plans division. So not their individual insurance division, but their entire retirement plan. So any Mass Mutual plan will now be Empower as well. And like I said, is that what they showed on the board, in the governmental space, they're number one. In 401k space, they stink. They're number two. So they're big in this space.
Other questions?
No question, but just a comment. I actually had Empower, my retirement company, and I was very pleased with them. Very good.
Yeah. And they're improving. When I say when they're purchasing and what they're doing to grow that division and to supply more to the participant, that's their mission. It's not to be the cheapest. It's not to be, catering to just bring on business. They want outcome. And I think that's the best commercial way of saying, hey, are you pleased with the technology and what they see? And if you need to call in, are they responsive? And I have nothing but good things for my participants on that side.
That's good.
And helping.
How what qualifies our employees to join them? When are our employees covered? Is every employee covered, or how many are covered?
Full-time and over 30 hours and after 6 months.
So everybody after 6 months, whether they're salaried or hourly, as long as they're full-time?
Yes.
Okay, and how many of our employees do join? Well, they all join because, the town does a, 5% for most employees, and then there's 2% for police department. So do they contribute anything, the employees? It's their choice. Their choice, okay. And at least half of them are doing contributions. Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, please.
What differentiates a governmental entity from a regular 401k?
Great question. Liability is a big part of it. You have a reduced responsibility of what's called the 5,500. In a governmental plan, you still want to be compliant. You still want to be audit ready, if you will. But you're lower down on the scale and you don't have to file some of the reports and some of the ERISA requirements that a typical 401k needs to do. In looking at this option, and you saw some of the different competitors up there, I really felt, right under the Verisight as a TPA with Mutual of Omaha as the record keeper, it's an extra layer of, what's a politically correct term, minutia, that you have to go through having two different organizations. And in a governmental plan, you don't have a complex situation here. And so to make it as streamlined and as easy as possible is key. And that's why I think the bundled plan is more eloquent, if you will, to what the needs are of the organization. But to answer your question, the brass tacks 5,500 and that ERISA requirements are the big difference.
Anybody else? Yeah, please.
Back on the local evaluation, if there's a hardship like a medical emergency or something like that, or loan processing things
Hardship and distribution, those fees that you see on the plan documents are now, I apologize, Dave, that I don't have each fee of a hardship or not, and I understand that it's, hardship, and we go, man, there's been a loss of a family member, why are we nickel and diming them? And I get it. But there are man-hours and there are extraordinary things that organizations must account for, even in those circumstances, to make sure that they're processed not only to the fiduciary standard. And I have yet to see one company, because all of those same fees that you have today, they're matched. They're not Empower or T-Row. They are not anything different than what you already have in the mutual plan today, because they do have those fees. Did I catch your question correctly? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was on the exemption, like if an employee had a major medical emergency or something that was well documented, could the loan processing fees be waived? I'm still after that, discussion you and I had at the beginning about, I've got 3,000 in my, in my 457 plan, and I need 1,500 of it. Well, I'm paying a $100 initiation fee, which is pretty steep.
Understood. Understood, and I wish I had the pay grade that I'd be able to answer that more appropriately. I don't see exceptions on that too much. And the flip side of it, if somebody's taking a hardship, there's another underlying, other than medical, there's an underlying other financial burden in that household, if you will. From a financial planning standpoint, I'd also say we could come back, even in a hardship situation, the IRS still wants their 20% taxes on that because it's considered a distribution, and the IRS, they're going to lose 20% to IRS, and they're also going to lose 10% for early withdrawal, whether it's hardship or not. So unfortunately, in a plan and in circumstances like that, I think $100 is pretty minimal to cover it when you compare it against the IRS, when you compare it against, even their early withdrawal penalties, etc. I can certainly ask Empower if I did, but I would be very surprised if that happened, because everybody would have a circumstance of why they should have it waived, and they put them in there for a reason. So if I'm a betting person, it's not a place that I think that they're gonna give on.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, I think we've got it covered. Thank you so much for coming in for us. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, the two people to my left and my right, I've had the fortunate to work with them now since I've been here. They been here longer than I have, but a good plan works when you have good communication from advisor to company, and then you have people that care on the other side. I work with a lot of plans, and I actually love getting their phone calls because they're good people. And I don't need to say that, I'm not trying to butter them up, but they're responsive and they're good people, and that's important. I drive out here, I love employees, but the two people on either side are a big part of that as well. So I thank you. They got all my contact information. If anybody has questions, I'll field them one-on-one. I'm glad to give other substantiation if you do. Most of everything that I covered on questions, empowers 3 pages response to your questions are also available to you as well. Okay? Thank you. Back on the road, right?
Yep, that's on the road. Thanks for calling.
Will do.
All right. Let's move on to the budget session. So, I have a comment to make before we get started, and that is, we have been at this for 3 months now almost. We have not made substantial progress on this budget at all. We have 6 weeks approximately before we have to produce a final budget, so we need to start making some decisions here about what we're going to do. The time for getting more and more data has come to an end. We need to start making decisions. All right. That having been said, I'm going to turn this over to Cindy.
No, I'm going to
Okay, so tonight you found 4 pieces of paper. If you want, there's some over there on the 4 pieces of paper, the legal side. The middle 2 you'll recognize the water part, and then there's a final page that we'll go over last. And I have them stacked in this order because this is the order I think will help you understand that. So, what I did was, in the first 4 columns, you'll see I took the profit and loss statement and put it in there, and then I differentiated what costs are for producing water and what costs are operating costs. This is in reverse. So I had a long talk with Ross after the last meeting, and from his experience in his previous life, before he was a fabulous treasurer, this is what he did. And so he gave me some pointers on how in his previous world, how they priced utilities. So I tried to take from what he shared with me and put this together so that we could try and price our water like they price utilities. So that's why I have it broken up between what it costs to produce the water and what it costs to operate. And the difference between those is you have these costs to produce, the operating cost you have whether you produce one gallon of water or not. So that's how we broke it down. Then I took and figured out how much water we have sold in the different tiers. Now I'd like to say that was easy, but it was not. But nonetheless, you have year to date, so we have January through December, and how much water we sold in each of our current tiers. You'll also see what our current rates are and what that current revenue should be from those sales. Then down below, you'll see where we have our base rates, our current base rates, and what revenue that produces. And then on both, at the ends of both, the last two columns are my proposed increases. So I took the production costs, I took what we sold, and I took our base rates, and I figured out where we were compared to where we need to be. So if you look down at the bottom, we need to be at $268,000 to cover production costs, and then we need to cover $826,000 in operating costs. Annually, we produce somewhere around 100,000 gallons of water. 100 million gallons of water, sorry. That's a big number for me. I'm not used to saying that kind of number.
And are you working on this sheet?
I am. I'm at the bottom left. So we produce somewhere around 100 million gallons of water a year. We sell around 83 million. If you, and so the calculation to figure out the production of what it's costing us to produce that water is $2.69
Per gallon?
per gallon, per 1,000 gallons.
So the F and the D are on the column next to the name, what are those?
That was for me to fixed and discretionary.
Okay.
So fixed is not something we can change because it's dictated. The discretionary, we have some leeway to change those numbers if we needed to.
Now, in, can I ask what?
Oh, please, go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so at the top of the column where it says water and it says 60, then you have 2021, is that for next year?
Correct.
So this is not actually what it costs to produce, this is what you're proposing it's going to take.
This is what we currently have budgeted for 2021 to produce the water, to run the water division.
So what the cost is in 2020 to produce water?
I'd have to get that for you.
We know it's September from the budget. We have those figures that were just given to us in our packet.
I'm sorry, Dave, turn on, Dave.
I'm just saying that, we do have a 9-month review of what the water, what was taken in the water, and we had, let's see, we spent the expenses is $557,000, 75% of the year.
I'm estimating it's this year, we're gonna be at around 756,000.
So the water sold?
No, that is, expenses.
So water charges received, what is the estimation there, so because we have 608 so far this year, 608,000. And that's in 9 months.
I want to be able to spread it like I did this one and make sure that everything balances through. So I don't want to give you a number off the top of my head, if that's all right.
Well, that's okay. The problem I have basically with this, so the whole budgeting thing is we're working on tomorrow's numbers. We don't know where we're at today, and that's the problem I have with the whole thing. Where are they at today? What do you expect to add? And
Give me a minute, and let me work through this so that you understand it, and I will answer that question. Okay? So, this is what, it's gonna cost us based on what we're budgeting, and that includes half of the amount that we need for the one is included in this. So we need $500,000, this is getting us 250 of that. So I've had, an indirect conversation with DOLA and found out that the majority of their, I was thinking that we could potentially get a 25% match. But from with COVID, with everything that's going on, and in the last couple of years, they don't do the 25 anymore, they do a 50-50 match. So we're gonna have $500,000 to even get, we're gonna have 250,000 to get the 500,000 we need to run that tank. And we have 2 years to do it. So we need to get the reserves in the first year so that we can get the grant for the whole thing in the second year.
well, I can't the second year also have, if we had to raise 125,000 in the first year, 125,000 in the second year, that gets us to 250.
But then we won't be able to run the tank in time. So we wouldn't be able to do it till the third year. We need to run the tank in 2 years.
Not according to the conversation that Tammy and I had here last week. But the last week, Tammy, we had 2 or 3 years to get that done.
We're looking at putting 100 aside a year to get the match.
But even if it's 125, we weren't responsible for putting like $250,000 away in 1 year.
Right.
And so part of that conversation was based on a 25% match, which we have learned is not the way that they're handling that any longer. And it was 2 years.
2 to 3 years.
Right, so stretching it to the max would be, we would have to be implementing in 23. But the other part of this conversation, and she hasn't got to that yet, she hasn't finished explaining the form, is that it also includes the increase that we're going to have to start addressing so that we're meeting our debt reserve. Because the thing is that these funds that we're starting to accumulate as matching funds for grants are going to be used so that we're meeting our debt reserve. But the moment we pull these funds to do the project, we again are not meeting our debt reserve. And so what's in here is, this is not, there's differences based on the project that we have to do, but these are not going to be substantial differences in what it costs us to make water this year versus next year. And so I understand why this data is helpful and useful, but it may be moving forward for the next budget, and now we have it as a baseline. She's created the report so that we can continue to provide it moving forward, but it's very difficult to try to also at the same time go backwards and create these reports for expenses we've already experienced. So.
If I can, just recap for my own understanding, make sure that's all, that I'm understanding that correctly, what was all just explained. So we have a tank that needs to be relined in a maximum of 3 years from now based on its current state. We're anticipating 3 years max. The town will need to lay out $250,000 of that on the town side with the anticipation that we might be able to get a 50% match from DOLA for the other half, for the other $250,000. Do we know the rate for DOLA grants, how likely it is that we would get that grant if we apply for it? Because I think that also impacts how much we need to set aside
It's dependent on how many applications are going in at that time, and how strong the grant application is when it's presented. They tend to prefer that you already have, shovel-ready projects, and, you have to have everything lined out and be able to show the need, and so it's really hard to anticipate whether or not you would get it on your first round. It's just really contingent upon how many applications. And so that's the thing too. What we're seeing is that the availability of funds is shrinking and the need for the funds is growing. So it's really a difficult position. What we do have going for us is a representative with DOLA who's very familiar with Paonia, who's very familiar with the workings of Paonia and the needs, and goes to bat for us as our representative when they are being reviewed. And she's a great asset, and so I know that she'll be incredibly important when we get to the application process.
Okay, and then the other piece is that we need to make sure we have sufficient money in reserves to cover our debt-related requirements. And when the lining of the tank happens, that will drop our reserves by the anticipated $250,000, and that will need to be replenished immediately.
We need to be replenishing it before we spend it.
Okay, so we need to have full coverage. What's the amount that we need to cover the debt?
And that'll come on a later sheet, but it's included in here. So
Okay.
when we're finished answering your questions, I'd love to give it back to Cindy and finish going through and explaining the sheets in front of you.
Okay. What I'm wondering, and I understand that it's going to be tight, and then we just have a bucket of money show up, but I'm wondering if the idea that Trustee Barry mentioned that of doing $125,000 a year, if we did that, if we budgeted for that consistently over 3 years, whether that would serve to replenish, because the first two pieces, the first 2 years of that would be our matching funds, and if we were budgeting $125 in the third year, I don't know if that is sufficient to meet our debt requirements or not. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
We don't want to run that scenario, but it is good when we're looking at the long-term planning.
I think that it would be agreeable to the board. I was going to wait until my training report to make this observation. In looking at our existing loan agreements, we are required by those loan agreements to have operation and maintenance reserve funds. And I asked the staff to include in your packets the covenants as it relates to those requirements. Just as a reminder, in 2019, December of 2019, we were advised by the state that we were deficient in our reserve funds, approximately $300,000. We made a good faith attempt to budget, and we responded to the state that we had accommodated for that in our budget planning, and they accepted that. However, you will see that we have not met that requirement this year, and unless we increase these rates in the fashion, or there could be 100 variations of the recommendations that Ms. Jones made, we will not accumulate the funds we need in the future. And I point out to you that there's some risk to us not meeting that requirement. First of all, if we decide to go ahead and try and fund future projects, and the lending agencies note we have not met our reserve requirements in previous debt instruments, they could look negatively at our application. And the most onerous implication would be that after having noticed this, that we have not met those reserve requirements, the debt holders could require us to hire a consultant that would come in and do a rate study and impose the rates that would meet the requirements of these debt instruments. I only and I think it should be included in the board minutes so that the people in the community can understand that the economy that the board's facing, if they do not increase these enterprise fund rates, it is imperative that we do that. Otherwise, we're going to be in violation of our own agreements. And that's the end of my statement.
So, this doesn't work. So Ross, in this exhibit F, that's all explained. I tried reading this and legally, obviously. But that is explained in here. If I were to go back through this and really drink a lot of coffee and read this, I will find that in there. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
It is in section F, and it's the operation and maintenance reserve fund,
Okay.
and under the section called rate study.
Yeah, okay. That's what I figured. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Down here, you have at the bottom of your sheet, capital outlay, $275,000.
Yes,
Is that to $250,000 that you get, is that in that 275?
it's the 250 for the tank cleaning and 25,000 for the engine, to start the engineering for the rollout.
Okay, then another question I had was the debt payments, the $214,732.
Yes,
We have with water, power, authority, and drinking water revolving fund,
yes,
that's a two.
yes.
Looks like in 2020, let's see, that only goes through June or July, doesn't it? The sheet that we're looking at here. Okay, never mind, thank you.
Okay, so back to my train of thought that I'm trying to share. So I took the budgeted costs, I broke them between production and operating, figured out what are, based on what we've sold in water year to date, what, we needed to meet the, nonetheless, so I came up with my proposed rate on the tier basis. The tier will cover the production cost. The base rate covers the operating costs. Any questions on that? Then I feed that into our budget, and that puts about 42,000 going into reserves rather than being spent, and that covers that includes having the 250 to put towards the lining and the 25 for the engineering. Then the last sheet shows what they use to calculate those rate covenants. So you'll see we were way down in 18, which is why we got the letter in 19. We made some adjustments.
We don't know where we're at.
Yeah, we are.
Last page.
This one is.
So in 18, we were under the requirements. We got the letter. We made some adjustments, knowing that we were in trouble. We made the adjustments and we were able to get to 190%. Then if you use the numbers that I'm estimating where we're going to end up at this year, we're under again, because we're required to maintain 110. At the rate we're going, and honestly, I don't see any way to change it, we're gonna be under, and so we need to make the adjustments, and that will put us at 115%. If we make the adjustments as I have here, that will put us at 115%, which meets our requirement and gives us the tiniest bit of cushion for emergencies. Because I'll tell you, emergencies are not built in here, and that's what hit us this year. Any questions?
Also, another reason that you see such a substantial drop in the reserve from last year to this year is not only emergency expenditures, but also because the rates that were provided and adopted last year modified the tier structure and didn't take into account what the loss of revenue would be with that modified tier structure. Because that was one of the reasons why we addressed the base rate last year, was so that we would continue to maintain our debt reserve. And with that tier structure modification, it basically broke even. It brought us basically the same amount as we had the previous year, which then caused a drop because of the unbudgeted, unplanned for emergency water situations we experienced this year.
You went very fast for me, Cindy, so
I'm sorry.
to back up, the numbers you have colored over here to propose with the rate, the different consumption levels, is that what you're proposing for the different tiers?
Yes.
And then what are you proposing for the base? What is that?
It starts at 35 for in-town residents, 50 for out-of-town and in-town commercial. And this is an attempt to get them to eventually be all the same as was requested at the last meeting, to get the rates so they're the same across the board for everybody. The base rates, that is what this structure is attempting to do. So you said in the last meeting you wanted the tiers so that the people using the most are paying their fair share. Then you wanted the base rates to come closer together so that everybody's paying the same. That was taken into consideration.
And the tier structure also takes into consideration the ongoing conversation about incentivizing the lower users. So if you see that it's estimated at $2.69 to produce water, the people that use 5,000 gallons or less receive the incentivization that their water tiers are less than what it costs the town to make the water. And so it's when you hit that 5,000 and above that you then hit that $2.70, which is what it costs to start producing water.
Does that become self-feeding?
In what way?
Well, because we're charging less than it costs. We're charging less than it costs to produce.
We have been, and yes, in a way it is, because if you're wanting to charge across the board based on the actual cost, and our very first tier for our very first 1,000 gallons of water started at $2.70. The reason that we didn't do that was the continued conversation about incentivizing the lower users. So the people that are using less than are receiving that rate in their charges for their usage, not the base rate, because in a perfect world, the base rate is funding the infrastructure and the cost before you make the water. So that's why it was done that way. But yes, and we absolutely could adjust the tiers so that it starts at the 260 or 270.
you have any idea what the percentage of people that are buying the water, fall into that 5,000 gallon or less?
Majority of ours are in the mid-ranges. I actually have the ability to pull that, but I haven't looked at that report.
Yeah, I would think it would be a small percentage that.
If you look at the column that doesn't have the title, that is the total of January through September. So you can calculate the percentage of each of those tiers.
Okay, thank you.
So we're trying to equalize, it seems like we've de-equalized the residential rates. We've raised the out-of-town twice as much as we've raised the in-town, and that doesn't belong together.
And I can tell you the reason I did that is because the people that are living on a fixed income in town, I couldn't. For 35 first. When I'm going from 35 to 50, or from 30 to 50 for in-town residents, seemed,
Well, it's going from 40 to 50 for out-of-town.
yep.
And that's double the rate of increase of the in-town.
And I can go to 50, but
I'm not advocating that. What I'm advocating is that the same rate increase happens to in-town and out-of-town. What you've done is spread, what we have done, is spread the out-of-town and in-town rates even further by its new base rate, rather than bringing them together. Those people that live out of town that also have fixed incomes, I'm also thinking of that. So, you know, currently we make 30 and 40, why didn't we go 35 and 45, or 35 and leave it at 40? You know what I'm saying?
I can tell you that I can take that 35 up, but if I take any of the rest of those down, we don't meet our need.
Well, isn't this really affected by whether we're going 125 or 250 in 1 year? That's a big bump right there. And I think it's really too much, and I agree with Trustee Barry and Trustee Patterson that 250 in 1 year seems like too much to try and save for that tank and try to do 125 each year seems more reasonable.
But you're gonna have to do more than that, because next year, I had in here another 170,000 because we have 2 lines we need to replace. I bumped those over to 2022, so you're gonna need to, so you're looking at needing another 250 next in 2022 to meet any additional costs and repairs that we need to do.
None of this is based on the massive inventory or all the studies that we're paying for right now.
Not yet, no. But those 2 lines that need replaced, they need replaced. They are, Travis, the 2 lines that need replaced in town center, the human relation.
There's it's 200 block of main, which is an old line, that we had problems earlier this year. And then the 300 block of Orchard, which, the 300 block of Orchard is the last line in town that has the potential to have lead pigtail lines on it.
So, yes, this is not based on that, and we know that. And that's actually part of the fear factor when we're doing this, is that we're just talking about the known that's known in the next 12 to 24 months. We haven't even gotten the data yet back from them. And The fact is that this is difficult, and we know it's difficult. It's difficult for us as well, paying the rates as well. But the cost to produce water, the cost to maintain the water, the cost to do the work, putting the infrastructure in the ground continue to go up. But our revenue streams and the amount and our boundaries are not increasing to the point that that's helping to offset it. So it's the same number of people and the same system that costs more to fix that are having to bear the burden of fixing it. I mean, and that's the fact of what the situation is that we're in, and that we know we need to do that line. That's coming. The divers have gone in. It's in worse shape than we thought it was going to be. We thought this was a 5-year repair. Now it's a 2 to 3, and 3 is pushing it. And it very well could be year 2 that we're in a situation where we need to do the work and we don't have the funds because we thought we were going to push it to the last minute. And that's the concern. Now, they're big jumps. We can switch them up a little. A conversation we had at the last meeting and I've had with some of the committees when we met is that historically the town tends to only review rates and make adjustments during budget. And I think that's terrible timing, but it's been the way it's been done. But the fact is that if we come in with a lower, what we'll end up doing, because we're going to do it different moving forward, is that at the end of that first quarter, when we're seeing the numbers and we're projecting out and it's not meeting what we needed to meet, we're going to be back here again, having that conversation again and saying, okay, it's been 3 months, we did it at the lower, here's these numbers again, here's the projections, here's what you see, and we're still not, we're going to need to address it. And so I don't think it's a bad idea to think about staggering increases when we do it, but of course that just needs a longer time building the reserve for the match and the reserve that we need to be meeting our current obligations and additional reserve so that when we have an emergency, we're not constantly yo-yoing back into a place where we're not compliant. Because that's what we've been doing for years.
Looking at your color sheets, on your 2020 actuals, you show that we generated $110,000 more than our expenditures this year. Am I reading that correctly?
Excellent, Jeff.
And I see in a packet on page 110, which is through 9 months, we're actually at 126,000. Or 117, excuse me. Is there any reason to think that we won't end the year with being a positive by 110 to 120,000?
I'm praying that my numbers are correct and we don't have any emergencies between now and then. Because we're at 70, with these numbers that are in front of you, we're at 77%. We're supposed to be at 110. So it could get worse if we have an emergency and have to replace another water line or another pump or anything that, the stuff's electronic, it breaks. So even with making that even though the bottom line shows 162,000, we're short on our reserve requirement.
So that projected overage is included in the numbers that establish that 77% reserve.
And the other thing is that we don't have results for our asset inventory and our water study. And it wouldn't surprise me a lot if we're going to be unhappy with what we find in that. And so we may end up taking this increase now and come February or March have to do another increase because of what they find out there. And I would rather, let's try and equalize our finances. Let's try and meet our debt obligations. The last thing you want somebody to do is to come in here and impose on us rates from outside that we can't decide on.
Can I ask a question on, well, on page 110 of the packet, I just wanted to clarify, it looks like debt service, line 50 for 2020 was not budgeted with anything in it. There's nothing in that budget line, but then for the proposed 2021, that same line is $214,000. So I just want to clarify what that means.
You're gonna have to tell me what it says at the top of the page you're looking at, because I don't have.
Okay, so I'm moving, this is in with the treasurer's report and disbursements, that part of the packet, or just if you look at the 2020 budget.
You're looking at the budget to actuals?
Yes, page 8 or 11 of the budget actually.
Okay, perfect. So the debt service is actually the water power authority and the drinking water revolving fund. The debt service line item is where I offset the principal and interest at the end of the year.
Okay, so adding those two lines together. I thank you.
It's actually, there's three because we do have a line of credit with UBB, and that, but we haven't had to use it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have to this year, but that, we do have that line of credit, and so that, for the debt service budget, that you would have to count all three of those lines.
Okay, so for those three together, I'm just doing the math here. So we've got the 183, 500, plus the 23, 315, plus $25. So we've got 206, 875 budgeted for 2020, and that jumps up to 214 in 2021. Is that just a difference in our payment requirements, or okay? And then on our line of credit, do you know what interest rate is on that?
I'm pretty sure it's 155. I think it's 155 basis points because we have a CD that secures it. The CD is at 55 basis points.
Okay.
I believe that the line of credit is either, there's a lot of numbers in my head right now, but I think that it's somewhere between 138 basis points and 165 basis points.
Okay.
I think it's 1% above the CD.
Okay. So can we point to that line of credit as available capital when we're talking about a grant match? To reduce what we actually have to have in the bank?
I don't know the answer to that.
Keep in mind, the monies that we receive from the sale of the sewer property, those funds are restricted to strictly sewer projects.
And at least in my experience working with grants and financials for grants, we never include a line of credit. That is, in fact, that is statement, it really is a
I
for
do
you.
not believe that you can, but I'm not an expert at structuring debt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, all right, it's 6:19, so
Okay.
we do need to make this quick.
Real quick, you have it for repairs and maintenance, you have it at $232,000. Yet if I look at 9 months on page 110 of the packet, we're at 103,000, so significant difference there. Didn't know what was driving that. You have a lot of the 2021, what's driving that number? I guess we could talk
I
about that.
unfortunately can't give you that information at the moment because my computer just went down. So, I can give you that information. I'll have to get it for you at our next meeting. And on that subject, we need some direction when it comes to the numbers that are presented. And we need to have a conversation about scheduling a meeting, a work session to continue the budget conversation. because the final budget hearing is scheduled for the second meeting in November, and I don't think one more work session is going to do the trick. So, during the regular meeting, we're going to need to address that, on adding an additional work session. But if we could get some direction on what you'd like to see when it comes to these numbers.
So I recognize that we're at a point where we need to start making decisions. Personally, what I would like to see is a reduction in the repair and maintenance budget. I don't know what products are guiding that, but hopefully something around 50,000 we could pull out of that to reduce that down, and then to reduce our capital outlay so that we can extend that over a 3-year time period. That will still allow us to meet our debt service requirements. And I think by doing that, we could maintain our current base rate for water and adopt the proposed new tier rate. So that would still be an increase in water costs for everyone in the community, but hopefully a little less painful if we're doing it by the tiers, and it might also encourage conservation. So that's my take on it.
I will put those numbers in the
Okay, all right, well, I think we need to adjourn the parent group your cap. Okay, well, if you guys want to...
I don't want to be the only voice of guidance here. I really like to know what the other one in the room thinks about it.
Okay. All right.
So what we'll do is, we'll take what we did and put it in and see if we're able to be better as close to it as we can. And if we don't, we will include the minimum increase on the base rate to present at the next meeting to you.
Can we talk about, how we're going to, doing a work session together,
No, we're going to do that in the regular meeting, is we'll set dates on that. Do I hear a second? Discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes. All right, next on the agenda is announcement. Does anybody have any announcements? Yes, Michelle.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for the record a comment I made at the last meeting, specific to communication. It was still timing I brought it up when we were discussing the administrator's evaluation, but it was not meant to be a critique of the administrator, but more a comment or request that at some point we have a discussion as a board about what we would like to see as a communication strategy. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other announcements? If not, I do have one. I would like to announce that today is our Honorable Chief of Police birthday. He is 42 years old. Congratulations on getting old on the town board. Next on the agenda is recognition of visitors and guests, and first up that is our Shop Safe, Shop Local recognition. And so we have wonderful people here from the Dulles County Library System, and so they're first on our list of awardees. If you guys come forward. Who's going to take our little certificate? And so these recognitions are given to businesses who really step up to keep our community safe and healthy, and the people in it. And the library has just done a magnificent job. They have an amazing system of ping pong balls. When you walk in the door, you take a ping pong ball, put it in another bowl, they know how many people are in there. It's so wonderful. It's very ingenious. So thank you so much, Bob, for everything that you're doing for us. Yeah. And we have 3 others, but I don't think anybody's here from those places, but they are. So Westbrook Wine and Spirits, who have done a magnificent job as well. The Root Wine Market, It's outside of town, both of those are outside of town, but they too are supporting keeping us all safe. And the last one is the high country shuttle. So, I want to make sure that all the businesses get their recognitions. Yes, Suzanne?
Can I get a mask from you? I forgot my mask when I came in. You don't have any. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else would like to speak? Is there anything else? Yes. Please state your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes, and the board is not going to comment on what you say or respond to any questions, but we will get it out to you later.
Can I speak without comment?
Yes, you can.
I'm here because I'm concerned about the backstage issue 1A.
Okay, can you state your name, please?
Lois Dow.
Okay. Thank you.
408 Rio Grande, Paonia.
Thank you.
Regarding that, I'm concerned about the proceeds that the city of Paonia might get from that particular issue if it is passed. Will the policemen and policewomen, will they be the ones who 100% receive the proceeds that are gained? Because they are the ones who face the public, they knock on the doors, they serve the warrants, and call domestic calls, things of that nature, moms and anybody who gets unruly. They are the ones who are in harm's way. And I would like to know if 100% of the proceeds from that issue would go into the pockets of the ones I have just mentioned. Not the higher ups, the police chief or the clericals or somebody else, rather than them.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else would like to speak? Yes.
I'm Aaron Watson with Dark Skies Paonia. I'm just here to, first of all, thank the board and employees, Chief Ferguson, Travis, thank you so much for the work on the streetlights so far, the new streetlights we've gotten, and getting those problem streetlights turned off. So first, thank you. Then I'm also here, I want to just remind you guys that a couple months ago I dropped off a dark sky lighting ordinance for the staff and trustees to look at. Paonia is getting a reputation to be a dark sky friendly town. We were just in National Geographic, which is really cool. There's a lot going on in Colorado right now in the dark sky world, and I think it's a great time to get this ordinance moving and get the dark sky process going. So I'm just here to kind of remind you guys that this is a priority and this is important right now, and we'd like to see steps taken to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Suzanne.
I'd like to... Suzanne Watson. You said my name, so. I'd like to add to that Dark Skies comment. And so admittedly, our streetlights actually, you know, they're all more pleasant. They're more orange and not round. But what I've been noticing, and I haven't ever had this problem before, is my neighbors are replacing their porch lights or security lights with these bright LED lights that stay on 24 hours or 12 hours all night, and they're so bright they can shine like an entire block away and cast shadows on the inside of your house. They're so bright. So, well, I think you've made progress with the street lights. LEDs are really becoming more of a problem with private landowners, and I think you need a dark skies ordinance to address this, because I'm not aware of a light pollution ordinance or light nuisance ordinance in our code, and I'm not so sure if I can do anything about it. So it would be nice to address this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, let's move on to staff reports. Administrators reports, Corinne.
Thank you. I did want to, I apologize, I didn't get to the link to look at the current numbers for the COVID updates, but that is available on the Delta County COVID update page. And they do update that very regularly. I did want to also make the board aware, if they're not already aware, that the governor revised the safer at home regulations and restricted gatherings for private gatherings to no more than 10 people and no more than 2 separate families to be in attendance. I am reviewing costs on updating our municipal code. There's a few different things that Muni Code is offering that I'm looking at and seeing how that would affect our code. One of those I already mentioned to you, which is the state law referencing, and that would also include links directly to the statute that is impacted by our code. Apologies, my mask is not on it. And the other part is a new thing that they've added, which is an update to replace language in your code to a gender neutral language. So we are looking at, I am looking at both of those and seeing what it would take and what the cost to the town would be for them to review and implement any changes. The town website transition is substantially complete. There are still some minor tweaks and things that we'll continue to work on. But I'm excited about the new website and its functionality. The new town website is townofpaonia.colorado.gov. And pretty soon our WordPress website will have an auto forward so that it automatically redirects to the new website. And then eventually the WordPress website will go down completely. The Brown Hills data were going down. Apologies, they did send an email with an update on their timeline, but those can sometimes get quickly buried and was missed. They did state that they are just waiting for a final few key components to arrive that unfortunately have been seriously delayed. And that as soon as they receive those final components, they can provide a really tight timeline on when that SCADA system update will be completed. A couple of other questions the board had on timeline of the project, I did include as well in my priorities that I handed out today, and that includes the SGM GIS mapping. They are scheduled for substantial completion by mid-November. The SGM capital improvement plan and inventory project estimated completion is the end of December. And JDS Hydro's infrastructure analysis estimated completion is end of March 2021. The water board applications have been given to the individuals who have requested them and have them published on the website so that people that are interested in participating on that advisory water committee can review the application and submit. The deadline is November 13th. And that's all I have.
Okay, questions for Chris from the board? Yes, Michelle.
Just want to say I think the website looks great. I appreciate all the work that's gone into that. And I wonder if it's set up in a way that will allow you to collect metrics on how it's being used and see what people are looking for and what pages they're using.
It is. We asked it to include that feature in the design. So we'll learn how to do that, but those are capabilities.
All right, other questions? Yes, Bill.
How are you coming on recovering the money from the delayed water fund? Water reserve, the back pay?
Are you seeing? So we sent out notifications, and we sent out preliminary letters and notifications to let everybody know that we were going to start processing those in our standard fashion. And are you seeing? I know some people are getting all the notifications where they've been calling and creating arrangements and agreements. On that, I also wanted to let the board know, I can't remember if I'd already reported, but all of the reimbursements that were agreed upon for the Clark Alley project, these were all paid in full. So that was they all complied with the agreement that we made.
All right, any other questions from the board? Yes, Dave.
What about the Main Street culvert with Paonia ditch?
As of yet, we have not received final word, and I need to follow up with them directly.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Questions from the public for Corinne on what she has reported on? Yes, Suzanne.
Suzanne Watson. So I want to point out that I think it's the Munich Code Company, isn't that people who are helping us with the website and minutes and everything? I want to point out on the agenda, when you click on those numbers next to the topic, they don't take you to the right portion of the agenda, and we're paying for the service, so they really should be fixing that. I don't know if anybody's noticed that or brought it to their attention. And then the referencing the state laws, that sounds interesting, but I'd like to suggest that we've got laws that it would be helpful if we reference our ordinances, for instance, when we have the resolution for the fees. It would be nice if people knew what ordinance that fee pertained to. And back in 2015, there was this document that was produced with the proposed fee, with a fee and the code section it came from, as well as the fee. So you could actually go and see what the language of that law that it applied to was. In a way, that's almost what we'll be doing with the state law, so it would be nice if we could do it with our own laws, make them more accessible to people that way, and know what these fees actually pertain to. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes?
Thank you, I guess, for, I don't know, or police, and it may have been separate from the topic, but...
You need to state your name first.
Oh, sorry. Thomas Martin, 302 Cycle Street. We had a police officer drop by our place today and notified us that the town had grants for COVID-19 relief for businesses to expend. And I don't think we qualify for the controls of the board, but I just want to say thanks for doing that, putting that forward, and getting what out of control that is available. That's great.
Okay, anything else from the public? All right, seeing none, let's move on to public works. Travis?
Our spring line repair project is complete, right before it snows, so. Our street project, we were gonna start Monday, kinda got delayed a couple days, but we are gonna plan on starting that, tomorrow, the intersection of Second and Grand. So that intersection will be closed for a little while. We are still running, we will be running the leaf back, as soon as the snow melts off a little bit, we could pick up leaves. And then we do have a couple small, park projects gonna start, just to have preparation for next year for that. Still working on, our inventory update, program. Then at the 2 million, we are still roughly around 5,000 to 6,000 gallons a day, so we're doing pretty good on water still. And that's all I've got, unless anybody has any questions.
Okay, questions from the board, Travis? Okay, seeing none, questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the police report. Neil?
The police department is focusing mostly on getting our required trainings done. We've done a lot of training in the last couple of weeks. It's been nice to be able to get that completed. November 6th we have our driving training, and then we're pretty much caught up on all the training that needed to be done. I have been working 3 night shifts a week for the last month. So starting at the beginning of November, I was out in the office during regular business hours. If anybody needs to help me, and that's about all I have for now.
Okay, any questions for the chief? Yes, Karen.
What about Halloween? Is there any patrols, special, or any
activities that the police department needs to be aware of?
Nothing that I'm aware of. We are still going to continue to do the handing out candy. We do every year whenever we see trick-or-treaters or anything, and we do have our bag program for the school still going. We handing out or handed out Thursday with all of our trick-or-treat bags that we normally do.
And so is there any public information or direction that the public needs to have about trick-or-treating COVID?
Nothing that I've seen, no.
There was something that came out from the Delta Department of Health.
I didn't see it.
Okay, we can go ahead and pass that out to the board if you want. If you would like that information, it was... Okay, yeah, that was it. Okay. All right, any other questions from the board? Yes, Dave?
The candidates about negotiations, and this may not be about the police for this, but we do need to talk to the judge. We promised that we would discuss with her salary, and we have not decided who's going to do that.
Okay, I will let you and Michelle and Neil and Bo get together and figure out what's going to happen with that. You're welcome. Yes, Karen.
People that said, I'm wondering, and if I missed this, I apologize, how it's going with having a place for the dog, any dogs to be, any animals to be sheltered?
At this time, all of our dog talk has stopped. Yes, we have nowhere to take them. We actually had to utilize tails. Last week was the first time we actually had one, and we had to utilize tails in order to take one of them that we had.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing members from the public, yes.
Christina Patterson, Pricewood. I was just concerned about those stray dogs. Isn't there volunteers in the community that take them, or do you have a...
Nobody that's stepped up or came in and talked to me.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Suzanne?
Have you approached any dog grooming businesses or people who, this could be a really good business opportunity for somebody?
No, we've gone to all the kennels in the area. We've gone to, we were in negotiations with one of them. We just haven't finalized anything at this point in time. We're kind of waiting to see what happens in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. I remember the joke from the old days was if you have a problem with dogs, just give a dentist gun.
Well, technically there's a law.
I know, I'm just...
There's one of the laws that we can take off the books.
Okay.
All right, Dan?
Dan Herman, I was just wondering if you notified the fire department of the dangers of you lighting that many candles under the candle.
Let's move on with the attorney's report vote.
Thank you, Mayor. Not much in my report. I guess the important thing is that we've got an election coming up, so vote. And then, depending on that election, we will or will not be engaging in discussions with respect to marijuana licensing and or taxing. Coupled with that is we will have a franchise agreement for the board at the first November meeting with respect to a cable franchise. And then lastly, we look to have a couple of subdivision reviews in the month of November, December. And as per my report, it goes without saying, but it's important that there isn't any ex parte communication and all discussions are on the record.
Thank you, Bo. Any questions for Bo from the board? Yes.
Access channel.
There is the possibility of that if the town is so interested in pursuing.
Anyone else? No, seeing none. Any questions for the public? Yes, Suzanne.
I just had a question. I missed the meeting, the work session that Bo Nerlin conducted with the Board of Trustees to talk about, that stuff.
It was a board training.
Exact board training, that's what I was trying to say. Do you contact the planning commission or the zoning commission and ask them to participate or invite them? Because this ex parte communication applies to them too. And sometimes when you're on these boards and commissions, it's a great opportunity to start learning the ropes. You know, how the council has to behave, and it's important, I think, to include them. And I don't know, in the past they haven't been, but I would just like to make that suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the public? All right, seeing none, let's move on with the treasurer's report. Treasurer King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We reviewed the payroll and disbursements, and we continued discussions with the finance director on the budget and enterprise funds. And I would ask the deputy clerk if she would include a copy of the exhibit F of our covenants and requirements from our bond agreements in the minutes so that the public can understand the requirements that the board is required to meet as it relates to our loan funds. And that concludes my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions for the treasurer from the board? Okay, seeing none, anything from the public? All right, seeing none, let's move on with disbursements.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve accounts payable of $123,234.22. Transfer payroll of $20,560.20. Payroll taxes of $21,950.45. And a payroll direct deposit of $20,560.20. And I will defer the more complicated part to my colleague.
And we're also just going to transfer funds. We have reserves that we have to keep funds for in reserve. We have internal grant funds of $454.96, and another one for $33,041.88, and a college trust fund of $106,806.45. And the three of those will be transferred to one CD in the amount of $140,303.29, and that will be kept for the sewer loan reserve. Okay, do I hear a second of the disbursements?
We both made.
Discussion? Are there questions? Yes, Michelle.
What is our time on the CDs?
We can only do one year.
1 year CDs? Okay.
So do you want to know what it's paying?
No, that was my question, the term. I'm just thinking back to the budget discussion and whether the CD could be considered when we're talking about matching funds. I know part of it is restricted because it's being used as collateral for the line of credit, but it looks like it's less than half of what we have in the CD now. So could the other half be referenced as funds available for matching funds?
That's a question we've been talking about, but we don't have an answer for it yet. But we are looking into that.
Okay, thanks. I also just want to say thank you on the disbursements. The descriptions are incredibly helpful.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none, questions from the public? Yes.
I have a question about the skid steer for $67,000. Is that the new one that you're purchasing? Correct. Oh, okay. And so you had it in the budget for $90,000 next year. Does that come off the budget then? You had it earmarked $90,000 for next year's budget, skid steer.
So that way that carried over, but so it won't end up carrying over. The difference between what he spent and what was budgeted will get reallocated.
So $23,000 is going into next year's.
Will go into next year's to be reallocated.
Okay, so that's a savings.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so next year's basically saving $70,000 in next year's budget.
No, that was just a carryover, so it just won't carry over except for what didn't get spent. So you have a checkbook full of money, and you write the check in this month, then so you wrote a check for 60,000, so 30,000 will carry, you have that to spend next year.
Okay. I think she's right.
That account is a zero out account, so every dollar that's in it gets allocated to something. So since we had 90,000, so right now it's showing on the budget as 90,000, it will get changed and relabeled as reallocated, and it will only show 30,000. I'm rounding.
All right, yes, hey.
I just want to point out that the board had approved an $80,000 purchase in Travis to the road bridge, and I'm coming well underneath that, so I want to congratulate and thank them for that.
Yes, Kate.
I just had a question which you probably answered, Chief. And it was the Halloween bags for $150. Is that the bags you all put together for the schools? Correct. Okay. I just wasn't aware of that program. And so getting back to the 2021 projects, so would this be updated since you've already spent you've already paid for it? Or because you paid for the skid steer, so that would be taken off of this 2021? How about, and were you able to pay for the bike rack and those things? Have they been paid for? The bike rack at Polis and Town Hall? Have they been paid for as well?
The Polis Park one was paid for, the other one has not been paid for.
So are there other things on this 2021 project that actually have been paid for and should potentially be taken off so that
It will get taken off.
So
it will get updated.
So will that be part of the next budget discussion?
Yes.
So that you know that we don't have $2.5 million that needs to be 2.6 million? So I'm asking, will that 2.6 be reduced?
Yes. It will be adjusted appropriately.
So would that change some of the budget discussion if it's changed?
Probably not.
You don't think so?
What happened on Tuesday is what's gonna change the budget discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be honest.
That makes sense. I guess what I'm wondering is, because I did not get to, I heard some of this discussion without this in front of me, so I was a little not as aware, but have these been prioritized as to what has to be done in terms of, it sounds like the tank is a must-do, but there are other things in here that are not a must-do in terms of state law, etc. So has the board prioritized some of these projects so it doesn't look quite so daunting?
Yes. The answer is yes.
And is that going to be reflected in an updated spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Suzanne.
Suzanne Watson. So, I guess I'm a little bit confused by, when you're talking about things being allocated, because I looked at that spreadsheet, and, for instance, winterizing the bathroom in the town park, was that something that was decided last year?
So I'm gonna jump in on this one, Pete. Okay, that spreadsheet that you have in front of you, the board, that's the list that was provided, was not a list that was anticipated nor expected to be included in the 2020 budget, as in all of those projects we wanted to get done. What we do every year is each department does their wish list that has all the stuff that we know we've got to do and things that we would like to start thinking about doing or planning for in the future. And at a meeting, the board requested a list of all of the items and a description of what they were. That gave a little bit more detail when you get in a really small line in a budget, a standard budget document. So that's the document that you were given. It isn't that we anticipated or intended to include winterizing the bathroom. It's just one of the items looking forward that we talked about doing. and wanted to, and so we provided the information on what we expected that cost to be and an explanation for it. But that list is not a 2020 or 2021 expected budgeted item list.
Okay, so this is from last year, because, it says 2021 projects on it, and that's why I'm really confused by it, because I don't know if I'm looking at spaghetti on the wall, or if I'm looking at last year's wish list, because it says 2021 projects. So it was, decided on last year for this year is what you're saying. 2020. No, it says 2021. This year's 2020. So why does it say 2021 on the top?
So for clarification, I thought you were referring to the same spreadsheet they were talking about, and I don't know which spreadsheet.
Well, I think I am. It's a $90,000 expenditure on the skid steer. It's the winterizing the bathrooms in the town park for $60,000. It's the commercial kitchen upgrade, and it says 2021 projects.
Because we're talking about the 2021 budget, it's just a header, it is not anticipated that all of those items would be in.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is confusing, because you say that you've already spent the money on the skid steer, and that was last year, so it shouldn't be.
The skid steer is not disbursement today.
Yeah, but so why are we talking about 2021 projects buying the skid steer?
Because that is old, Suzanne, that is a work in progress, is going along. We have not allocated $8 to any of that stuff except what is paid for in the 2020 budget.
Okay.
Everything else is just, if we have money, we can do it. It is not guaranteed to be paid for.
So it would be less confusing, I guess, if things were highlighted in color, if they were like taken care of, or if things are really important, if they were done in red, because it's extremely confusing. Budget season is confusing anyway, and not to, it's hard to know what I should be wasting my time on here. You know, I get hung up on something that's completely irrelevant now, and I have a limited amount of time that I can look at this stuff, so I kind of wish it was, indicated a little bit differently.
So what to add to that is the fact that we also have a limited amount of time to create these documents, and that document in front of you was a board requested document that was supplied, and we'll take into consideration ways that we continue to clarify and make it easier for people to understand it when they're reviewing it.
Okay.
But when a skid steer discussion starts in the 2018 year for the 2019 budget, it's a line item on the budget. When it wasn't expended, it carried forward because it's still necessary.
You're like moving forward, like the trash truck, if the trash.
Exactly.
Or is the trash truck line here right away?
Until it was purchased,
Okay.
it was included in a potential for a carryover until 2021, in case it wasn't purchased this year. But it has been so, in the updated information provided, it will not be included on the future expenditure.
And as a quick aside, you know, the bathrooms and the town park get vandalized during the summer, and I think it would just become a nightmare to keep those open. It would just be a maintenance headache, and it would not be costly for us. So, as an aside, thank you.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? All right, all in favor? All opposed? All right, that passes. Let's move on to the water split minor subdivision. And who is going to take the lead on this one?
I will do my best to answer questions. I don't see a representative of the requesters here. So I'm happy to answer questions, and included in the packet is my report and breakdown of the process, what the requirements are for review, how those requirements were met, and the section for the board review when approving or not approving a minor subdivision application. You may recall, some of you may not, up until about 2 years ago, minor subdivisions were approved at an administrative level. They didn't come before the board, and it was felt that a secondary look beyond just the person who reviews the initial application and approves the document should also have a look at them. They're not required to go to planning. They don't meet the same requirement level as a major subdivision. and there's nothing outside of ordinance, code, or anything with this application that's in front of you. I do apologize that the map wasn't included on Friday. I worked so hard on this packet on Friday, and sitting home Sunday, all of a sudden a light bulb came on, and I said, I don't think I attached the map. So apologies for that, but I did attach the map to the packet Monday, and hopefully everyone had an opportunity to review that.
All right, questions for Corinne about this subdivision?
This is not a question, this is a compliment. In 2 years on the board, almost 2 years on the board, this is the most thorough report I've seen by a town manager, and I really, a town administrator. We really appreciate your work and how thorough it was. You took us through every step. So it's pretty easy to be able to look at the overall view of this, and I appreciate the amount of time you put on this. Thank you, Corinne.
Okay. How about we get a motion on the table? Yeah, sure, Bill.
So, if I'm reading this correctly, all the water and sewer taps have already been paid.
Correct.
All right. Yes, Michelle.
I just want to say I'm recusing myself from this vote.
Okay. All right, can we have a motion on the table, please? Yes.
I'm sorry, do you mind clarifying why?
It's work related.
All right. Can we get a motion on the table?
We approve the, Rocksport subdivision.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? From the board? Okay, hearing none, any discussion from the public? Yes, you did.
I haven't reviewed the procedures, but do you have a public hearing on any of this, or?
No.
Because it's a minor subdivision.
Right, yes, okay. All right, well, seeing no other comments, Karen, is that a hand up, or is that? Okay. You just got it. All right, we have a motion and a second, all in favor of the Larkspur minor subdivision? All opposed? All opposed? All right, that motion passes. Let's move on, Colorado Code Consulting Contract Review. All right, we have had questions we had a public meeting in which concerns arose about Colorado Code Consulting. Those questions were presented to Colorado Code Consulting. We did receive a document back talking about or responding to each of those questions. And so we're going to continue the discussion of the current contract with Colorado Construction. I believe Dan Reardon is here. Would you like to address the board, Dan?
Well, not really. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for the 3 years that we've been helping. And certainly we respect your decision, however you choose to go for your community. I think I replied completely for your reading pleasure, and I'm happy to entertain questions and respond that I don't have anything else to offer this time.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Reardon? Yes, Michelle.
Actually, I was looking for info about the contract specifically.
Okay, sure.
So in Article 1 of the contract, it states that it's an annual contract unless terminated with 60 days written notice prior to the annual expiration, otherwise it renews. But then in Article 4, it says termination by either party within 10 days notice. So I'm wondering if that supersedes Article 1 or what the actual required notice is.
I think it's big for a 60-day notice, frankly, provision, which to the extent that you wanted to terminate this contract before the end of 2020 would be November 1. Our Article 4 termination, I believe, is contemplating any sort of breach of contract and under that section. But frankly, if this is amended, because I agree upon that too, if this is amended, I think that needs to be clarified.
Okay, thank you. One other question I had about the contract, and this I suppose would be a question for Dan.
I didn't see anything in the contract that talks about coverage if you're on vacation or out sick or otherwise unavailable. Is that something that Colorado Code Consulting provides, or how does that work?
Yes, I've got to take this off, sorry. Bruce Stanley is the building official for Cedar Ridge, for Orchard City, and now for Hotchkiss. Mr. Bo may be able to answer how, if that's a permanent position for him or not for Hotchkiss. I don't know.
He's the building inspector. I mean, there's not like any sort of, I mean, I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, I don't know.
It's just like, I mean, it's not like a full-time, but it's, on as needed to fill the responsibilities.
Right. So anyway, Colorado Code Consulting hired Bruce Stanley as a part-time employee to be my substitute. And we had him up here once or twice. I try to work things out to where we don't have to go through that because it's challenging for the contractors to try to guess, well, what's going to happen with this guy. So if I'm taking time off, I try to communicate with everybody and try to give everyone a heads up. I look for photographs as much as I can and so forth. Just try to keep it smooth, but we do have a backup if we need.
Any other questions or discussion about this? Comments? Opinions? Dick?
Well, there's a lot of community inside this town and many other towns about whether we should have our own internal building inspector, and we've gone through the mill with a number of people that have been building inspectors hired by the town, and a lot of concern about that are favoritism. In my somewhat limited experience with building inspectors having built houses, I appreciate the partnership that building inspectors provide when they are especially not biased. There were some allegations made by people in that dependable number that a number of contractors refuse to build inside Paonia primarily because our codes are so restrictive and the onerous building inspection requirements. I haven't really anything about this personally. I just wonder whether part of that comes from being able to do limited contracting in the county and not having to follow the rules. One of the valid reasons for that. So I'm not clear on that, but those are some of the comments we're dealing with.
Thank you, Dave. Any other comments? Yes, Michelle.
Well, in reviewing the responses we received, I'm a little concerned that it feels to me that we're dealing with kind of a he said, she said situation. Based on what we heard at the initial listening session, there were a number of community members who had concerns with our current inspection process. And the response we received from Colorado Consulting essentially said that those were unfounded allegations. And I just, in some ways it comes down to a question of do we trust our community members or do we trust our building inspector? And that to me is a very difficult question. I find it difficult not to side with our community in that situation. But I just want to put that out there.
Any other comments?
Well, I'll respond to that.
Yeah, please do.
First of all, I don't know that I've been given the specifics, and I don't think this is necessarily the platform for getting into minor details, but I don't recall my response exactly, but I think I said many of the allegations could be just hearsay and so forth. Partially because what I read in the Mercer Herald said a lumberyard employee addressed the board and I've never even worked with anybody that works at the lumberyard that I know of. So I don't know how to respond to the allegations when I don't know what they are.
is, Mr. Knudsen, as you said, there is a conundrum when you're in a jurisdiction that's within a county that has no building code. Same thing happened in my nearly 20 years in Delta. When you're enforcing regulations, you have permit fees and so forth, it's very enticing for people to want to build outside the city limits, and that's always an argument. But then there are people who say, gee whiz, I'm glad we have building codes and my property values are protected and so forth, and there's value to having codes. But that's certainly a community response and community decision. Like I said at the beginning, we certainly respect your decision to choose however you want to go. If you want a local building inspector, that's fine. If you want to revoke the building codes, that's fine. That's your choice of the community. When I proposed amendments to the adoption of the 18 codes, it was with those kinds of things in mind, trying to keep costs down for builders as much as we can. So, again, if you have enough information to go forward with the decision, that's great. And if your decision is to negate the contract with Colorado Code Consulting, we certainly respect that, and that's fine. So we're just here to say we'll go with it, whatever your decisions are here. And we can certainly respect constructive criticism. If I know what I'm addressing, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I would like to make one comment, is that I have appreciated, having worked with the previous building inspector and seeing what had gone on with the previous building inspector. Colorado Code Consulting has been an absolute breath of fresh air. That we have professionals who are adhering to the code, who are there all the time, who are responsive. I have found it to really be a benefit to this town, and I would, in some ways, really not like the prospect of having to go back and try and find somebody, make sure that they're trained, and then run into the problems as they suggested, especially somebody living in the community who then has to go in and lay the hammer down on somebody, his neighbor, who's not building up the code. And I think that could create a lot of problems. So that's just my personal opinion. I know that one audience member who wants to speak, but I wanted to ask you both, is this thing to then go back into executive session to make a decision on this?
Now, we are entitled to go into executive session for matters that may be subject to negotiation and or legal advice with respect to the contract. The contract is in place, so I think that there's a couple of ways that you can go about it. If the board was so inclined to, say, hypothetically, and again, nothing against Mr. Reardon here, but just laying out the options that are available. If the board was so inclined to terminate the contract and or seek an RFP, you could give that action this evening, which would provide notice to CCC within the accorded time frame. I would probably suggest that there be a request that they continue to serve at least through 2020, so that you could have that period of time. In the alternative, you can allow for the contract to remain in place. If there are certain other conditions or items that you wanted to talk about or negotiate, it could be possible to do that in executive session. And it seems like, we don't want to lose our negotiating ability here, kind of highlighting those issues before the public. Or it could be, if it was some kind of minor things, giving that direction to staff and requesting that staff provide a proposed revised contract to CCC, approval by them and approval by the board at a November board meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, Suzanne?
Suzanne Watson. So I'm a little bit, I appreciate governmental affairs committee's work on this. I think there's some statements that I'm a little bit concerned about, and that is this talk of favoritism. And we're afraid of having a local person doing the building code. Are we afraid of a local person who's our chief of police? Favoritism? Are we afraid of a local person who's our town administrator and ultimately kind of has a little bit of a dominion over the building department. No, that doesn't seem to be a problem. So I'm not quite sure where this favoritism word is coming from. I think it's really unfair to compare Dave Coleman, who was hired at $15 an hour, because the town would not consider a higher wage for the building inspector at the time. And $15 an hour. Before him, the building inspector made $15 an hour, and he had to ride on the trash truck when he didn't have any work. What kind of come down is that when you go around seeing the people that you're inspecting having to haul their trash for them? I really think we're not comparing apples to apples here. That being said, the town also fell down on their obligations. We didn't make sure that he was going to the classes that he was required, Dave Coleman, to become a certified building inspector. He had no training. He was just bringing out his contractor shtick for letting learn from Denver how building inspectors were supposed to act. So it's really unfair to compare this really unqualified person that we dropped the ball on to this professional company that's charging us $120 an hour. And sure, it's really convenient for the town to say, great, this is a great building inspection company, it's really easy for us, but it's crippling for the people that have to pull the permits and pay the fees. The town has fallen down on their obligations, even with CCC, because the fees that are being passed on to the people are not written in the form of a law. And if there's no law, we shouldn't be required to pay them. You don't establish fees by resolution. That's not a law. Even when you look at the International Building Code, it says the fees that are established by law by the applicable authority. That's you guys. And a law is an ordinance. It's not a resolution. And an ordinance that says fees shall be established by resolution, that's not an acceptable law. It doesn't detail it's for a plan review. It doesn't detail we're charging, the building permit fee. It's way too vague. You can't look up and find out what these fees are. I'm a little concerned about Bruce Stanley. He's the building inspector that's employed by Searidge. They budget $11,000 a year for his building inspection services. We're budgeting, what, 30? The first year we hired Colorado Code, it was $48,000 you were paying them. Searidge at that time was paying $9,000 to their building inspector, and they're a larger town. Hotchkiss went and hired Bruce Stanley. I mean, why do we have to have Bruce Stanley being hired through the Colorado Code Company? Because all of a sudden, he's not an $11,000 a year employee. He's someone who falls into the $40,000 plan. And I know we're doing the budget right now, and we're looking at ways to cut costs. And I really think if we did a review of this, I think we need to review. I think it's good to put an RFP out there and ask. I'm concerned because I'm wondering, when he agreed to work for Colorado Code, if he came and worked directly for Paonia now, was there some language in the contract he just signed with CCC that he'd be violating something? Would there be a little conflict of interest there? Have we kind of screwed ourselves here? That maybe we can't find someone who's very highly qualified but less expensive than CCC? So, I think I covered it all. I was kind of stopping abruptly. But I really think that, here's another thought. We have a lot of talented individuals in this community and a lot of people with a lot of knowledge. There are people who are contractors, roofers, homeowners, and I'd like us to get together and talk about what makes a good building department. I really think we're in this together, Paonia. We can pull together and we can come up with what we'd like to see and what we need. And I think $15 an hour is shit pay for anybody. We should never consider that type of pay for a competent building official. And so we need to kind of decide what we want to pay somebody if you do an RFP, And sometimes asking around to other town managers and finding if someone has time on their schedule. When Bruce Stanley goes and serves on hospice, on those days, can he pop up here and do our inspections too, or is he really overloaded now? Because he does work for a lot of towns at this point in time. But I'd like there to be kind of a thorough board review of this, to see what our alternatives are. Thank you.
All right, any others? Yes, Paige.
Paige Smith, and I know I bring this up at every meeting about building permits, but I really appreciate that you put the contract in here, because now I know where the building fees are coming from. The $50 building inspection. So to just buttress Suzanne's point, no public person has any idea where the fees are coming from that are being imposed on them. The fees in this contract need to be adopted by you all and put on the webpage so people know why they're in charge. There's nothing on the webpage. So if you're going to, you need to do it. I don't know when this contract is up, but you all need to do that to make it clear to people what they're going to have to pay. And the other piece I wanted to bring up is, Dan mentioned the 2018 building code. The town of Paonia has adopted the 2003 building code by reference. You can't use the 2018 one at all, unless you change your ordinance to adopt it. So it's not a personal choice. This is in your ordinance. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Tom?
Tom Smarkle, just a second. Regardless of whatever action you guys take regarding the contract or potential inspectors, there's another portion of this problem that I hope you do take action on tonight, and that's setting up the review board. I think that would, for my purposes, would have been really good to have when the previous building inspector, David Coleman, was still active. Basically, the ability to have recourse gave, I think, a lot of the problems that come with what you're talking about, retribution or special treatment or whatever. And as I understand it, we're supposed to have that set up anyway, just as a town. I think it's part of the town ordinances. So that's my input. I'm trying to stay out of the whole thing. But on the other end of it, hopefully we can have a review board of some of that.
Thank you. All right, one more time, Suzanne.
This is really short, and this is an example of where the town's kind of falling down. So on the fee schedule, there's a building official plan review fee of $50. I don't know what it is now, it went up a little bit. But back when I was on the board, and James Berry had Corinne pull together all the ordinances that pertain to the specific fees. And if you go to the building official plan review, it pertains to 17-2-40, which is subdivision plan reviews. It's not a plan review for what you're handing the building inspector. It's an ordinance that was established for subdivision plan reviews. So that's why it's, I think, really important to reference the ordinances that we have when we have these fees, just so people know that they're applying the right one to the right fee. Thank you.
All right. So, yes, did you want to say something, Dan?
I would like to comment on a couple of things.
Sure.
Okay, and I think it would help a lot to clarify the fees. The fees have been established by the town board. And so whether you have a part-time local building inspector or myself, it doesn't matter. The value of the project is going to be so much, and the fee is established, and you pay it to the town. The fee that we charge the town is $50 per inspection. And if the permit fee was $900 for a new home, and we do 15 inspections, we end up charging the town $750, and they put $150 in their pocket. So people are not paying us $50 for inspection. The town is paying us. If we ever have a project that the town collected $150 on and we have 4 inspections, then the town loses $50 in the deal. But there are enough other projects where they're making up that difference. And so that's one thing. The plan review fee, it used to be $50 per hour, and as I explained to the town board in my reply, I have all the code books on electronic access. I have electronic review program. My reviews are done in 25 to 30% of the time that used to be done here. And my reviews are very thorough. All the information is then there. Everybody has a roadmap for completing the project, and it is cost effective because there aren't any hiccups later on to say, oh, you didn't tell me that. I didn't know that. It's all spelled out in the plan review. So our reviews are completed in a short amount of time, and so the overall cost can be a savings to the community if they have decent plans. So, and then the last thing that I want to point out is in the adopted codes that we have, and the residential code in particular, section R10111, or 104.11, alternative materials, design methods of construction and equipment. It says we can use alternative designs. I don't mandate that anybody follow the 2018, but the 2018, which I'm hoping the town will adopt, is so much clearer than the old books. It's so much clearer, and it's a helpful tool. So I tell people, hey, if you want to use this section or this part of the code and it helps your project, let's use it. We have the tool. It's legal. It's in the code book that this town adopted. So no one's willy-nilly just saying, today I feel like enforcing the 2018. I'm here to serve the public and help them with their projects. And all of these books are tools. I know how to use them. I try to help people use them to their benefit. That's all.
Thank you. Well, take me out.
I just want to check with you procedurally, Mayor. Are we continuing the discussion at the board level, or do we want to?
That's what I wanted to ask the board. What would you like to do? The options are, we can have another executive session to discuss contract negotiations and what we want to change, if anything, in the contract. We can go ahead and direct the staff to put out an RFP and give notice to Colorado Food Consulting that we are not going to continue the contract with Colorado Food Consulting. We can table this matter and have another discussion on it because the contract is in effect unless we say something that we don't want the contract in effect. So, what would the board like to do? Yes?
So I guess to clarify about the contract terms, because if we're going by Article 1, then this is our last meeting, is our last regular meeting where we could make a change to the contract before it becomes effective annually for 2021.
I don't believe that's the case.
No, that is correct.
That is correct, okay.
We're going to terminate the existing contract and we can provide notice before November 1st.
Okay, thank you.
What if just amending the existing contract?
I think we need to be communicative with our code consultant and say, hey, look, we want some amendments to come into play.
If we're requesting amendments, is that also a decision that needs to be made at this meeting? Or, you know, if, let's say we get to mid-November and we have requested amendments, at that point our contract is already self-renewed in 2021, is that accurate?
That is accurate. It is subject to annual appropriation. I think that we could potentially be a little bit soft with our language and provide notice, say, hey, look, we would like to terminate this subject to amendments, and we'll be coming back to you in November with those proposed changes. I don't want to commit for Dan, but maybe he could communicate some of that as well in terms of what CCC's approach or response would be.
So how I'm feeling about
but we've got a couple of different related issues we need to address. One is certainly on the town side of doing our work to clarify the fees, make sure they're posted properly, make sure they match our code, and getting our appeals lawyer in place. That's all town side work. But then in terms of the contract and how we move forward, I'm still feeling a disconnect between what we're hearing from Dan and from Colorado Code Consulting and what we're hearing from the community. So for example, Dan said he's appreciate the use of 2018 code. We've heard from residents that they feel like the 2018 code has been mandated for their projects. It's also supposed to be set up through Colorado Code Consulting so that everything's very clear up front and not surprise fees. But that's one of the concerns that people in town have had, is that they feel surprised by additional fees and by the total expense. So I feel like at the very least, this is a communication disconnect that we need to address somehow as we move forward.
So it sounds like either we take some action tonight, or we delay this to another time and keep the contract with Colorado Consulting for another year. Dave?
I would make a motion to continue the contract with Colorado Code Consulting for next year while we crash through this. One of the things that is our responsibility is to adopt the 2018 codes, and there's been a document that is huge that Dan has worked a million hours on to bring our municipal codes and the 2018 code together, and it's waiting for adoption. So I'd like to see that done, so that's why I'm making the motion that we continue the agreement, and I'm going to urge the board that we make that process happen.
Do I hear a second? Second. All right, discussion from the board, further? Yes, Michelle.
I feel like adopting or continuing the contract without any amendments or addressing some of the concerns we've received is a disservice to our community, and will make a number of community members feel like their voices have not been heard.
Okay. Any other board? Yes, Nick.
Yeah, I would agree with what Michelle said. I think we do need to terminate the contract, and as Bo mentioned, maybe we could put in some, just how you worded it, but some modifications or adjustments to the contract that could be looked at, but no, I think we should terminate the contract.
Okay, Karen?
We could terminate this present contract and ask CCC to reply to our RFP and with certain amendments that we would have done, just amending it. And one of those amendments could be that it doesn't renew annually. About a 90-day termination, so that we're not locked into it. If we don't do it tonight, we got another year going.
Okay. Kim?
Yeah, I second that for the purpose of conversation. I'm 100% behind it, but I would rather do that than risk not having a building inspector, which I think is a real issue. I'm sorry that we can't try and renegotiate this contract and put out an RFP at the same time. I would love to see what kind of response we get, because if we're without a building inspector, that can be a problem.
Dave?
I'd just like to point out that if we decide we're going to go with a new service, I've been very experienced in trying to hire building inspectors before, and invariably they come from the construction industry and they need to be certified, and it's a really long process. And it is expensive to get them certified. And then you find out there's no building permits in the community, and there's no need for a person. And that was a discussion I had with our planning meeting just yesterday about the ups and downs of building permits in Paonia. With the invoices I've seen from Colorado Code Consulting, it's based on the activity. It's not based on a flat set amount we pay every year. So I think that's a fairly safe thing to go out. I understand what Trustee Patterson is saying about some people in the community feeling like we're not listening to them. We're trying to clear up the communication, and I think that this gives us the opportunity to clear that communication up and try to work for more constructive outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Michelle.
I also would just like to remind the board that one of the major concerns brought up by the community is the cost. And without renegotiating the contract, there's no adjustment opportunity there. So I absolutely understand the concern about finding ourselves in a situation where we have an inspector. I agree that's not a situation we want to be in. I think we're in a tough spot with the timing, but I would still like to at least explore the opportunity of negotiating some changes to the contract. And as Tammy mentioned, if we could put an RFP out at the same time just to see who's out there and see if maybe there's someone who's certified and would be interested in working in a way that makes sense for the town, that would be useful data for us to have.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the board? No, okay. Suzanne?
Suzanne Watson. So I don't appreciate this Debbie Downer attitude that we're just not going to find you. It's just a real negativity that I think is not appreciated. I think we can do better than that. When you look at this contract, $93 per visit, if he comes 2 times a week over a year, that exceeded his entire budget for a building inspector right there. And that's in the contract. So I think we can do way better than this. This is a really expensive service. And as I say, there's an individual in Seared, Orchard City, Hotchkiss now. They're not full-time in any of those communities. They're working among all of them. And that's what we can't afford a full-time building inspector, and there's not going to be enough work for them. So that's the format that we would have to look for. I appreciate Trustee Buddinger's comments, and I think perhaps what you're alluding to is when we first hired CCC, they were an interim building inspection service. They were here for a short period of time while Ken Knight tried to hire somebody, which never happened, and then they turned into the full-time building service. But they can be an interim building service. You know, you can contract with them for 3 months. For 2 months, whatever you think the time you need to do a thoughtful and thorough investigation, of the alternatives. They're a private business. I don't know if they're going to just walk away from us. They're in the business of making money. So I think we've got some leverage here. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? All right, seeing none. Did you want to comment again?
Well, just one comment. I know there are a lot of concerns about the money, and I pointed this out in my reply to the board, but the plan review fees are the only thing that are different. All the other fees are established by the town board, and they're going to be paid by the applicants, no matter who is in this position. The plan review fees, most jurisdictions say that the flat 65% of whatever the building permit is, and that's how it always used to be written in the building code that way. If someone comes here with reasonable plans and they pay me $120 an hour, and it's not paid to me, it's paid to my company, and we get this done in a very short time, they're actually saving money. It's going to cost them less than 65% of the building permit. So the costs are totally in the hands of the applicants. If they come to Colorado Code Consulting with thorough plans, their plan review will be done in short order, and it will save them money. And so I heard topics of, hey, Dan doesn't live here, he doesn't support our community. Actually, I'm a lot more involved and spend money in this community more than people know. But there are designers in this community. So rather than paying Colorado Code Consulting hours to review your plans, hire a local designer. There's some great ones in town. I would encourage it. And then they're going to save money on my plan, and that's a good way to go. Lastly, it's been real slow out there for months. There's been weeks I haven't come here at all. I am the building official for Parachute. I substituted for the city of Uray when their building inspector quit. You're not paying me when I'm not here. And I've got plenty to do. I've got plenty to do anyway. So, you know, I take no offense to any decision that is made by this board or the community. It's fine, whatever you'd like to do. But just make sure you're well informed before you make a decision. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. And the motion is to extend the Colorado Code Consulting contract for 1 year. And then in that year, to make sure that we go ahead and get the other pieces done that need to be done. Anyone have questions about what that is? All right. All in favor of continuing Colorado, never mind. For a year, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Okay, that motion fails. Would someone like to make a counter motion? Michelle?
Give me a second. Before I move, I would like to ask another question of Bo regarding contracts and if we were to propose a shorter contract term to Colorado Code Consulting, say 3 months, with the potential for renewal, but also pending further discussion and decision-making by the board, how does that work with our current contract terms? Do we terminate our current contract?
I think your safest approach is to terminate and put forth a request that we do a modification or an amendment that would be a 3-month, whatever direction that is. But, I mean, look, I know Dan, I think he's pretty reasonable. I've dealt with DCC, and I think they're pretty reasonable. But in terms of watching out for fast interest, I do think that it's probably the cleanest approach from the town's perspective. It can provide a notice of termination, and then, you know, try to word it relatively with soft gloves and say, hey, look, that being said, we are interested in an interim 3-month process, you know, three-month contract where we go through this process or whatever it might be.
Does that help at all with your sense that we need to talk through it more before making changes?
As Suzanne has mentioned, I'm very pessimistic. And how long it will take us to adopt the 2018 and how long it will take us to be able to, you know, so I'm really comfortable with a longer leeway than just 2 months. But I'm going against it. I'll probably go with you guys, so.
But it seems like we already have 2 months of a contract, because this will go almost the end of the year. So if we had another 3-month contract after the 2-month contract, would give us a total final.
I'm going to do that.
So my concern is that we still have a lot that the board wants to discuss about this, and we're in the middle of budget season, and we have fewer meetings in November and December. And I think all of that means if we make a decision tonight, it's a bit of a hasty decision. My concern is that we terminate the contract and propose a revised contract to Colorado Code Consulting for 3 months with the potential for renewal pending additional terms.
Okay.
May I?
Yes, please do.
Just for clarification, would it be 3 months, proposing that it be the first 3 months of 2021, and then maybe we could propose something that it would renew for a month-to-month period of time?
That sounds great.
Good idea. All right. Do you want to amend the motion to include those things?
I will amend the motion to I move that we terminate the Coast of Colorado Code Consulting at the end of 2020 and ask to establish a 3-month contract with them for the first quarter of 2021 with automatic 1-month extensions.
Right, yeah, and with upon further negotiations with.
Pending further negotiations.
All right, that's what we have a motion. Do we have a second? All right. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? All right, that motion carries. We have a pass. All right, let's move on to the next item, staff retirement plan review and update. I would suggest that we put a motion on the table on this.
That we adopt the recommendations of our Representative Shane Squid to approve empower retirement plan for our employees.
Do I have a second? All right, discussion on this? Yeah, Jill.
Just to ask a couple questions. I'm glad you had the opportunity to hear tonight to speak about things. Is there going to be any extra cost to the town? Like anything change?
No, there's a reduction in cost.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, anything from the audience? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? All right, that motion carries. Let's move on to the building permit fee structure.
The public water system.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I miss? Public water system. I'm sorry, I'm having hard, so. Public water system discharge permit inspection results. I suspect we just need a motion on this one again.
No, it's not necessarily a motion required. It's
Okay.
information.
Oh, okay.
We did it as an agenda item so that it would be in the public packet and people have an opportunity to see that. On the next agenda, we anticipate having the sanitary survey, inspection results and the remediation plan to clear the additional.
Okay. Anybody want to comment or say anything about that? Question? I'm sorry, guys. I've got a migraine running through my brain, so I shall carry on as best I can.
May I ask one question?
Yes.
On page 161 of the packet, one of the recommendations notes that the treatment plant that generates the discharge stream has been down since 2015. Which treatment plant are they referring to there? Because I thought both were operational at this point.
Well, the 1 million is that it's not online. That's the one that we're doing the SCADA system rebuild. It's not online. We run it so that everything stays oiled, so it's not sitting stagnant, but it's not used, it's not online and providing water to the community.
So it hasn't been providing water since 2015?
Other than, we brought it online because of... Other than when we were under the boil order in early 2019, it has not been online.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize that.
Okay, any other questions? Or comments? All right, seeing none, let's move on to now the building permit fee structure. I am assuming that this is a continued discussion. I'm sorry, people, my brain is just not working here.
But at the last meeting, this was continued discussion to give a larger opportunity for people to provide feedback. I do apologize, Trustee Patterson brought to my attention that the request that I send out to the individuals who attended our Let's Talk series. So that has been done, but was not done early enough to garnish garnish any results. So I don't have any feedback from anyone in the community, and I don't know if there's any feedback from the board. We did run a couple of scenarios using existing permits in the town and provided those so that you could see what effect that could potentially have on the fees that are collected.
Do you have questions, discussion, comments?
I would still like to see us adopt a simplified version of the fee structure, or some version of it pending what we decide to do with inspection. There were some questions in the packet specifically about where different types of work would fall. I think that's a matter for discussion, and it may be that we need to revise the simplified fee structure to address those, or have some kind of language about administrative discretion on projects that aren't specifically listed. I'm not sure how the board would want us to move forward with that.
Yeah.
From my perspective, and it's a bit of an outsider perspective, and maybe not necessarily legal advice, so take it for what it's worth, but it seems like you guys have kind of 3 or 4 different issues that are pending, and they're all related to this building fee concept. And from, again, my perspective, I think the biggest kind of thing that's out there first and foremost is, are you going to adopt the 2018 building code? There's been resources that have been allocated towards doing that by the town. With that, it has its own kind of suggestions and areas where you can opt in and opt out. Subsequent to that, I think you could try to use the information from the 2018 code, see if that supplements some of the questions or areas that are provided here. If it doesn't, you could have more of a wholesale review at potentially the committee level initially, and or then the board level, where you're setting your fee structure or getting some ranges that are in place. But I really think that you need to have whomever your building official is going to be weighing on that as well, because it's going to be input from them in terms of what the time capacity would be. So I think that kind of substantive fee discussions might be a little bit premature until there's more of a decision or discussion with respect to the 2018 code adoption. But that's frankly just my perspective in terms of if you're going to be writing resolutions and ordinances adopting the code, you could also at that time adopt the fees that would be appropriate.
So let's not get the cart before the horse, and we could table this for now.
Dan? I have a question, I don't know if anybody can answer this, Dan, or can able to. What is the holdup in adopting the 28 building? I mean, that was the discussion on that for a couple of years ago.
And my understanding is it was supposed to go to planning and zoning for their review before the town council. It's never made it to planning and zoning.
It had one, it went before planning, and it went before the planning commission in March. And there was initial review, but part of the document that Trustee Knudsen was mentioning earlier that Dan provided was also notations and things where the building code was in conflict with other sections of our municipal code. And so I think what occurred at that meeting was just a little bit of confusion about the sections that he had made suggestions on that were in zoning versus the actual building code. And the meeting, they never completed the review. And of course, we all know what happened right at the end of March. So it's never gone back for a second review and recommendation to the board. So that is something that needs, the conversation that we've been having internally is, do we need to take that back to the planning commission again and have them review? That is not required. Or do we pick it up at the board level? And there hasn't been any decisions made on that.
Yes.
Well, I mean, we've done this before, but perhaps a joint meeting with the planning commission and the trustees and just get it on the table for both groups at the same time, instead of trying to do two separate meetings and have that at least kick off the process. And maybe, obviously, we're in our calendar with budget and all that stuff, we couldn't do it till January, but that gives us plenty of scheduling time.
Actually, that sounds like a really good idea. And then if there are other issues that we need to address with the planning commission at that point in time, whether it's, directions on the master plan or whatever, we can do it all in one big meeting and get it taken care of. So do I have a motion to table this?
We'll do what we table this item.
Okay, do I have a second? All right, all in favor of table? Yes, you can.
I do want to say, I do appreciate Will Merlin's comments about, finding out what you're doing with the new building inspector before you just start adopting 2018 code. One of the reasons why Hotchinson's building inspector quit was because they adopted the 2018 code and they didn't let him know. He wasn't included in the process. So now, apparently, this Bruce Stanley is enforcing their code for them, but depending on who you hire, if they're enforcing the same year code in every community, it might be a little cheaper for us, for the communities, because they're not having to jump between code and code. So to go a little farther along that process, that hiring process or RFP process would be good. And aside from that, the stuff that Dan Meriden did with the zoning code, he was suggesting changes in setback locations for sheds, and I just felt there were things that were really inappropriate that he was meddling with, that I'm not quite sure what his credentials were to suggest changes with our zoning code. It had nothing to do with building, and it was a little worrisome. So I'm not so sure. I can understand 2018 code, but as far as setbacks for people's storage sheds and corner properties and accessory buildings, I think we need to keep that out of it. It only makes it more complicated and more controversial. Thank you.
Yes, so.
If I may, I would frankly disagree with that. Ridgeway went through this process where they adopted the 2018 building code, and then subsequent to that, they redid the residential zone district that would allow for things like accessory dwelling units and reducing setbacks, and it tied in really nicely because you have what you need to build the standard to, and then coupled with that, there's some expanded uses under the residential zone district, and you were able to kind of cross-reference both building and zoning, and it was a symbiotic approach.
I think we're talking about different things, though, but I appreciate that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to table this. All in favor? Opposed? All right. That motion passes. So let's move on to the revised 2021 budget calendar. All right, so we have one in our packet. I think we can start adding the if needed in there.
So, of course, this budget calendar modification just takes into account the conversation we had at the last meeting about having one meeting in December the 3rd Tuesday instead of the 2nd Tuesday, so that we're past the official certification from the county. And of course, with that, there were some modifications to the preparation of final budget dates and such. So, but if you look at this, you'll note that tonight wasn't even on there for a budget workshop.
Right.
But was necessary, and so what we need to do is look at the calendar and see when we can have another work session. Next Tuesday, of course, is election day. Doesn't necessarily affect our ability to have a work session earlier in the day. I have to be here at 7 o'clock anyway. No, but of course, I'm just saying we're continue the pattern of Tuesday nights. The next Tuesday is the 3rd. If you're not comfortable doing that on an election day, I don't know what the availability of the board is on a different day during that week, but I definitely think we need to have another one before the 10th.
So if we have one on the 7th, it might distract us from election results for a while. So
Just remember that if you get too far toward the end of the week, you're really pressing city's ability to implement any decisions you make for a packet that goes out Friday or potentially Monday or Tuesday. Do you want to do it Monday? Well, Monday's the 2nd. Again, it's up to you when you want to do it. You know, I know, it's so much time in the next.
Right. Well, I work from Monday rather than Thursday. Monday?
I can be here on Monday.
Okay, all right, so Monday's out. Election day?
Do it earlier, do it during the day instead of at night.
What is your availability, Kennedy, Michelle?
I don't know.
I could do any time after 2 o'clock, 2 or later.
You want to do it, say, 2 o'clock, 2:30?
That's a good idea.
2:30 on Tuesday?
Yeah.
Okay.
December 3rd.
Yeah.
November 2nd.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking about election.
So, what day?
Third.
Monday,
Okay,
Tuesday, November 3rd, at 2:30.
Yeah, 2:30, okay.
Sorry. Tuesday the 3rd is election day. At
Okay.
2:30. And contingent upon that, we may bring a revised calendar at the next meeting.
Okay.
We need more.
All right. So, we're meeting next Tuesday at 2:30. All right. Okay. Last on the, well, not last, but next on the agenda is the Free Angels Whole America Together discussion. Dave, would you like to take this up, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the development group is trying to be, well, actually trying to work on polarization that's been happening in our civil society. A couple of years ago, I was asked by a friend, what about the biggest issue politically was this, and I said I thought it was really politics. Today, I think I would say polarization even exceeds that. The group Brave Angels was formed in 2016 to try and help people that were both Trump and Clinton supporters talk to each other in a civil way across differences so they could learn from each other and be more respectful and understanding of each other. Since 2016, my group has formed in almost every single state. There's coordinators in Colorado, there's a number of Republican and Democratic representatives that are signed on the group and signed some of their support. So the legal support is inside your packet, and basically looks at the concept that we encourage all citizens of the United States to engage in and allow for a peaceful transition of power, or no transition at all, depending on the election. So the method of working on is to consider that as a possible position for the town, and also if the town does believe in that, then allowing me to put a banner for Braver Angels in our vacant lot on the way into town, where the school bus is parked, but not in front of it. So that's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Yes, Michelle.
Is there a cost to the town to get?
So the reason it's not out, it's going to be from my house.
Yes, there.
Yeah, what?
Is there a sign, is there, Mr. website or something?
Yeah, it shows your website. It basically talks about building a house united, that we're all citizens of the United States, and that we agree to accept the results of the election, and eschew violence and try to understand each other. So So it's not a political statement, it's a statement about how we are as citizens.
If I may, real quick.
Yes, please do.
And I spoke to Trustee Knudsen about this request and also took a look at Raver Angels. And it's important that they are a non-political, they're a 501c entity, and they don't have any pending ballot questions or issues that they've taken a position statement one way or the other with respect to the ballot questions that are before Colorado voters in November. So with that, if the letter was approved, in my opinion, again, don't provide legal advice in an open meeting, but in my opinion, it wouldn't be a violation of any of the campaign financing aspects that with the town moved into, because we're not dedicating any resources to a political group.
Okay. Well, since we don't have a whole bunch of people jumping up and down to speak, I would like to say something. While I believe in the movement and I like what they're doing, I don't think this is something that the board should speak for our citizenry on. That is what we were elected to do, is to represent the people of the town. And this seems to me outside the scope of our responsibilities. As to signing the pledge, I mean, I think anybody who wants to sign the pledge, sign the pledge. But I don't think this is a board issue and not a board responsibility. All right, other comments and discussion? Yeah, Bill.
Well, I would just like to echo your thoughts, Mayor. I don't think that the town needs to be involved in this, personally.
Yes, Karen.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I would like to thank Trustee Knudsen for trying, and I think we all need to try a little harder to try to get along, because it's getting hard out there, and this is a really strange time, and I think something like this is very much needed, so I will be signing it. Thank you.
Any other comments?
If we were to join it as a citizen, would we also say a title, a trustee, and say
My preference would be that you don't.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any of that conversation.
Oh, it doesn't matter. We stand this all.
She just asked if she could sign it, turn it over to her town trustee, or, town trustee, and close it now.
I said my preference would be.
Okay, I'm sorry, I put words in your mouth, I apologize. Anyone else on the board? Yes, Dave.
One of the reasons this, I was willing to get action on this is driving around Paonia and looking at the yard signs. Anyone who's walking around their streets sees that there's a major division in our community about who's being supported in this election. All I'm asking the board to do is encourage citizens to consider signing this. I'm not saying you have to adopt the policy, but I'm asking us to encourage citizens to consider signing the letter. So I do think, as leaders in the community, in supporting respect and civility, which I've seen this board work really hard to bring a high level of respect and civility to our meetings, I'm feeling that this board should also expand that and encourage the citizens to also consider signing the letter. So that's what I'm asking of the board. You don't have to sign the letter, but encouraging the citizens to consider it.
Okay, Suzanne, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I really respect your position, Mary. I think this time in history, it's really charged. And I think people can interpret your sign you know, it's only going to be interpreted one way or another, and I think it could actually contribute to division. I mean, sometimes perhaps the best solution is just silence and respecting where people are at, because sometimes it's confusing, all these different messages, and then before you know it, people ascribe what they think that you're trying to tell them through the sign, and it only builds. And so I think sometimes for the town to kind of stay out of something like that, I mean, I don't want to sound corny, and I know it's too bad this has been politicized, but we've got the United States flag. It's the United States of America. It's like we stand together. The flag is kind of all we need, and it's been adopted traditionally, and even that becomes politicized. You know, and I actually was maybe a little more skeptical of the flag until I did my family genealogy. And I saw in 1500, I had relatives that moved to Massachusetts, and I saw that I had relatives who were Minutemen. And I mean, it's just like, wow, I don't know, maybe they burned witches in Salem. I don't know, maybe they were really bad people. But when you think of the sacrifices people have made, and people come at it with all different places in their hearts, you know what I mean? And not everybody has the same perspective, but I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just hard to come up with a cohesive symbol sometimes, especially I think right now when things are so divided. And I know I choose to fly the American flag in my yard during holidays because I think of the sacrifices and the meaning that it is, but maybe someone else who's flying it is thinking something different. But the thing is, we're all kind of united because no one really knows, because it's just the flag, and nobody's flag is different than anybody else's. So, I don't know. I think people might think this could be a coded message, and it might be uncomfortable for some people, and I wouldn't want to see that. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because I think it's a wonderful sentiment and thought. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. We do have the banner out now that we're in this together, and that's a COVID banner, but it could also be the election banner as well. So maybe the sentiment is out there.
Yes, Betsy.
H. Smith, Paonia, just had a clarification. You said that the group was a 501c. Is it a 501c3 or a 4?
I think it's a 3.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's a 3.
And that makes a difference.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes, Betsy.
Betsy Johnson, 1010 3rd Street. I knew a little bit about what was coming in this evening, and I did some research on Greater Angels, and I do respect the mission of the organization. I did some reading about how it came to be and how the leaders came to this place, and it all, seems very wholesome and good. But I would also echo what you, Mary, and Suzanne have both said. I don't think, especially at this time, anything new should be presented to the town a week before the election. We saw the results of the town not feeling they had enough time to process the whole color coding of the downtown, area. This would be something new and perhaps seen suspiciously by all of us or none of us. We don't know. But if it is this really good organization, I would highly recommend, and I would be very supportive of attending. They have workshops. They have chapters, in every state. There is a membership fee. You can join individually. And, if the town wanted to encourage a workshop coming after COVID or something, I could see that. But I, as a resident, would be not offended, but a little suspicious
of something like this coming a week before the election, and, I could be totally wrong. But I would like to suggest that we not make it a town recommendation. But individually, let's all sign a letter. And I did see that there are a lot of important people who have signed the letter and they have used their titles. I would prefer that we all just, as human beings, sign it. It's a good thing, not worry about the title. So, thank you.
Yes.
Chris Kendall, Minnesota Creek Road. I agree with what all you guys have said about it, it might be good, but up until tonight, I had never heard about it. And bringing something on like that nobody's ever heard about, not that it's bad or good, I'm not saying either way, but I think, like everybody said, that there's too much already going on. You need to get it out there a different way than this town. Like maybe put an ad in the newspaper and, just from you or something, or, and get people so that they're aware of it before you try to make it, and I really firmly don't believe in the town signing letters for a lot of this stuff. Because you guys are representing all of us, whether you realize it or not, whether we live in town or out of town, and your actions by signing these letters, whether they're for this or for environmental groups or whatever, they're saying that we're all behind it. And if we don't know what it is, how can we be behind it? And even if we do, maybe we are, maybe we aren't. But I think in this time of the way things are going, it would be better if, Dave, if you would take it and maybe do an ad and make awareness of the project to the community. And then you could do something down the road. Thank you.
I have a lot of comments, if I'm not going to make a motion.
Okay.
But I will say that I appreciate the email and everything about the timing and where before the election. Part of the motivation is also seeing some surveys that said that 40% of people are voting on one side and also 40% people that vote on the other side definitively state that they will not support the results of the election if their candidate loses. That's very concerning to me about the amount of polarization we have. So, if nothing else, I've raised up prayer angels in everyone's mind, and I hope that all of you will look at it and consider it. The idea of two different online mediated debates happening this week, and you can easily sign up for that without being members. So, I hear what people are saying, I hear what Trustee Bailey and Myron Mayor are saying about the concern about this being something that the town is not quite ready for, especially given what happened on Grand Avenue. I think those are all really good points about change. I'm not going to stop. Because I feel like when you take a position as an elected official and your voters voting for you, you're expected to take a stand. And that's why I wanted to do this. So, thanks everyone.
All right, thank you, Dave.
Can I just make one quick comment on there? It's a little humorous, but it's kind of funny.
I'll give us a laugh.
Well, so I was just gonna say, we're in this together. I mean, even now, I kind of question, what the heck does it mean? Does it mean we're all gonna share our germs and get sick and develop? No, everyone used to do that. Like, wearing masks, and it's kind of funny because it's super ambiguous. So it's like, what the heck does that mean? Anyway, thank you.
All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I hear a second? All right, any discussion? Okay. Yes, Dave.
If I'm reading this right, there was a comment made by a citizen at the meeting. It was only referenced, but there was nothing that said what his religious comment was. Constantine Bushville, he gave his comments.
you have those, Amanda? Okay. Anything else?
Yes, I have a question. The special minutes, are you going over those, or?
Yeah, it's all part of it.
Okay, there's, two, I don't have it in front of me, but there was one commissioner listed, and then a second word under that just said commissioner. I was wondering, was there a second planning commission person that attended that work session?
I see it.
And what name is that?
Those commissioners were Lucy Hunter and Louise Marshall.
Okay.
And the chair.
Okay, because it wasn't in the minutes, it just said commissioner.
Yes, I'll add that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else? Yes, Paige.
Paige Smith, I just wanted to note, I believe it's the October 13th meeting minutes under committee reports. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. The tree board is kind of been put under a committee towards the end of the October 13th meeting minutes. And of course, I'm scrolling, and it's under space to create. If you look on page
Tree board.
8,
Yeah.
the tree board should have its own,
Yeah.
be by itself without it not being listed, right?
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second, all in favor? Opposed? All right, we're going to, that motion passes. Let's move on to the mayor's report. Well, the mayor has several things to talk about. The Christmas tree program is coming along nicely. At this point, we're going to have a lights and siren escort from the highway into town, and Santa's going to be wandering around with the kids. We're going to have hot chocolate here at Town Hall, and the junior high school bands and the high school and junior high school choruses will sing for us in Coles Park. So socially distanced, of course, but so it's going to be a good time. And if anyone wants to bring ornaments and put them on the truck with the tree, please feel free to bring some handy ornaments and stick them on the truck with the tree, or just come and wish everybody a safe trip. And we're also going to do a little bit of honoring for our first responders. Yeah, November 12th, 10 o'clock in the morning. It will be in front of town. Yes, Kate.
I'm sorry, this is Paige. I heard that this is the Christmas, where was the Christmas tree from? It's going to be...
It's kind of out of Montrose. It's in the end from Palgrave and Granisa Forest. Okay, we did, using our COVID money, we bought two banners that were placed outside of town. And on one side it said, "My mask protects you, your mask protects me," and on the other side it said, "Shop safe, shop local." The one by the high school within 24 hours was ripped to shreds and torn down. Which again just shows the polarization existing in this community. So that sign has been vandalized. It is a crime to deface town property and to destroy town property. So just don't do it again, whoever you are. I can't, but
How did it say it?
What?
How did it say it?
It says, "My mask protects you, your mask protects me," and then on the other side, "Shop safe, shop local." And then the third thing is, so the goals have been, that we came up with at our retreat, were sent to everybody. If you have any feedback, please send it to Corinne. She will forward it to me, and I will make any changes that are needed. They even had really good comments about, so the next step is implementation and deciding which of those pieces we should attack first, because we can't do them all at once, and that was a really good point. And so that would be the next piece, is to, after we get the goals finalized, then we could please come up with prioritization. All right, that's the end of my report. Let's go to committee reports, finance and personnel.
Well, once again, we were signing checks tomorrow, and the public is going to watch. We did need to get construction done in our system, and not be freezing on the league. And we have to go until April to
2 p.m. 3 o'clock? Yes, okay. 3 o'clock on November 9th, but it's open to the public.
All right, thank you. Public Works Utilities Facilities, Tammy and Bill. Okay, we met on October 19th, trustee Bear and I, and Administrator Ferguson, and Public Works Director Travis Silver, and we discussed a long list of ongoing projects, many of which were already covered tonight. The Paonia Junior High School, Junior Senior High School welding year was to be completed over the weekend. I don't know if that was completed.
No, we haven't completed yet.
Okay. The sidewalk repair is going well but slowly. According to Mr. Lumberg, it was due to a lack of contract crew members. They anticipate that the work on box alley will be completed this week, and they will then move to the south side of 3rd between Onaga and Parklet, and have one other smaller section. And we talked about mapping, which was discussed tonight. Staff inventory, or Public Works inventory of all of the equipment and so forth that they have. They hope that once everything is inventory, it will be put on a spreadsheet, and we will provide a better way to track all of the inventory in the future. And we, Joanne, not Patson anymore, Joanne will be working on that. The boat water sales system is in the shop and being built. Is that completed, or?
No, it's not completed yet. It's, we're running into technical difficulties trying to figure out how to get this thing.
Okay, I thought you guys there today kind of working on it, so, all right. Let's see, it was suggested that prior to filing for creation of additional water storage, which would be in the future, that the town ensure its legal rights are shored up. And let's see, that was done. Okay, so we did ask that the staff, and Corinne actually said that the staff is working on a timeline of the last 10 years of all the water projects that have occurred. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of water projects have been done in the last few years. We had a discussion about what the production levels were prior to the 2016 line replacement project on Lambo Mesa, which was just a huge project, for those of you who don't remember that. Once the pipes were replaced, the 2 million gallon tank production dropped from 400,000 to 300,000 gallons per day, so that was a huge savings. They subsequently did a replacement project on 2nd and 3rd Streets that resulted in an additional drop of about 13% in production, and a project on Box Elder resulted in another 8% drop in production. So I think the whole discussion was about the town has done a lot of things to conserve water in the last few years, and we just want to get that on a timetable that people can look at and actually see what the town has been doing. And I don't believe we have scheduled another meeting, is that correct? No. So the holidays, we do not have a meeting scheduled at this time. Thank you. Do you have anything to add to it?
No, I think the town covered it pretty well.
So I do have a question. So when you say drops in production, what does that mean? Does that mean drops in leakage, drops in, it seems like you're producing less water when you do these. The leakage was pretty bad. The leakage, yeah. Reduces, okay, yeah. All right, that makes sense, yeah. All right, space to create. I think we have, at this point, we need to meet one more time to make a final decision whether this is going to go forward or be discontinued. And then after that, we will report to the board about that. Tree board. So the tree board met last Tuesday, I believe, on October 20th. And one of the big things about that meeting was that the tree board is working towards creating a draft tree management plan, and that hinges a lot on the
receiving and reviewing the tree assessment that's being done by the Colorado State Forest Service in Canyon, so we're anticipating that anytime now. I don't know what the status is on that. So the board would also like to see that the 2007 pathways report which was done on the state of the town sidewalks be updated using current data, including the tree assessment and public input. And Jeff Thompson, who is a new tree board member, is for a living, I'm not sure exactly what he does, but he takes data and creates plans from that data, and he said he is willing to give his time, invest his time in helping to create this plan. He said once the tree survey is in, he recommends that the tree board start assessing sidewalks where the trees are an issue. And personally, I believe that the updated pathways report could also be used as part of the town's master plan update. And the next tree board meeting will be scheduled once the Forest Service tree survey has been received and read by the board members. And Paula Martin, who is the chair of the tree board, has begun the process of applying for the Tree City USA designation for 2021. That's it.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, yeah, we have one more comment from the audience.
Sorry, I have a question, and I don't know if I missed it somewhere or what, but it goes back to the Public Works Committee and Public Works. You bought a new skid steer. What are we doing with the old skid steer?
They'll go up for auction.
It'll go up for auction. Okay, that's what I was wondering.
All right, anything else? Last year, going. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your indulgence on